Check 1 and 2. Good evening, everyone. Well, evening over here in the UK. Good day if you're tuning in from the States, and good whatever else from all the other people tuning in from wherever they're tuning in from. Let me know that you can hear me okay. I've just got a hello, so I'm assuming that I can be heard okay. Thanks for that, Dana. Good evening. Let me know that the audio is all good, because we have got a lot to cover today. It's been an eventful week and a half, or however long it's been since my last live stream. A lot has gone down that I need to keep you guys informed with. So yeah, greetings if you can hear me okay. All right. Not sure how thoroughly prepared I'm feeling today, but I'm going to do my best. The reason I'm feeling slightly like we might need more time, okay, audio's all good, thank you very much, is because there's a lot to get through today. A lot to get through if we're going to cover the entire topic. But let's just, long story short, the TLDR is I responded to a recent reconstruction of Amenhotep III, which obviously I maintain is awful. And the reconstruction artist, or forensic reconstruction or forensic facial approximation artist, I don't know how he likes to be referred to, but I'm going to say the reconstruction artist, and I will stress it's an art and not a science. And that is something that's really important. That's going to be one of the recurring themes that we're going to cover today. Didn't like our criticism, but in my view, the criticism is warranted, and I think the criticism was well supported. So it wasn't like we were just making, random statements and throwing our toys out the pram. I think there was a good degree of supporting evidence for all of the criticisms that we've raised. And since then, actually, there's been quite a lot of dialogue that's taken place between myself and the reconstruction artist. Cicero Moraes is his name. It's been contentious, I'm not gonna lie. I would say we have a love-hate relationship in that we both love what we do and we're both incredibly passionate about what we do. But the bottom line is, I believe, vehemently in the things that I say. I don't just say them for the sake of it. If I wasn't able to back up any of the claims that I make, then I wouldn't make the claims. He would say the same about himself, but I would debate that, obviously. I would debate that he's able to back up some of the decisions he's made. And I think that's exactly where we essentially come at loggerheads, is where I feel there's been a lack of rigor in some of the decision-making process, and some of the decisions that you've made, in my opinion, are, questionable, and he could have made better choices. And I actually think that that's where this dialogue is going to bring us to. I'm actually very optimistic, because actually looking at the body of his work, he's not in a position where I feel like there couldn't be improvements made, and we're going to see that. I'm going to give him a fair shake, as I tend to like to do. You guys know that about me. I'm going to give him a fair shake and look at some of the other pieces of work that he's produced. I think there's potential there, and I think one of the things that I've uncovered in terms of reading through the several papers he sent me and looking at his processes is he's guilty of something that actually a lot of people are guilty of. He's guilty of something that I was guilty of, and he's guilty of something that a lot of people in our community and outside our community are guilty of. And that is not understanding and appreciating African phenotypic diversity. And I think that's where we diverge. That's where our differences mount. Because I think he, like many other people around the world and people of African descent, is influenced by this idea of there being one kind of black, one kind of quote unquote, melanated continental African. And what happens is when people get confronted with certain features or with certain physical characteristics, because it doesn't fit into that, and you've heard me say this term before, true Negroid paradigm, because it doesn't fit into that kind of like, well, this is a black person, so therefore they're supposed to have jet black skin, a really broad nose, blah, 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 blah. These are all terms that you've got to see come up. It can't be a black person because this one has a narrow nose. And you know that that is totally false. And this is something that we fight against vehemently on this channel. So actually say, this person's black, 100% black, 100% African, 100%, and so is this person, and they have completely opposite features. You're not late, don't worry, just me, I've just started. Okay, I'm in my introductory rant at the moment, so you haven't missed a darn thing. But I think people are looking and they're expecting to see that. And when they don't see that, what they assume, and many people do it, is they assume, oh, this person must be mixed because they have hybridized features. They've got, their nose has got Eurasian features. And they never, ever, it's the most bizarre thing in the world. It's like, as soon as we get into the realm of historical anthropology, the whole out of Africa theory, and it's a theory by the way, but the whole out of Africa theory goes completely out of the window. And people completely forget that everybody descends from Africans. The African was the default phenotype and everything else descends from there. All of a sudden, Africa becomes this secondary receiver, becomes this recessive participant in history. And every time we see something that is slightly outside of this true Negroid paradigm, we call it European, or we call it Asian, or we call it whatever, not knowing that they inherited those features from us. And this is going to be one of the things that you see. I feel like it's a recurring theme. And as I kind of went through the stuff that he was sending me, and he was sending me a lot of stuff. The guy's been in my DMs. I'm not going to lie to you. He's been in my DMs. Every new upload I've done, he's been, messaging me. Like, he's been on my case. I'm not going to lie to you. And I kind of was politely receiving him first of all, and then I was like, dude, you're gonna have to frigging give me some space and give me a break here, mate. I think it's really upset him, the criticism that he's received. And I'm gonna say fair enough, because I'm probably equally as sensitive. I'm quite sensitive when people criticize me. I might just randomly pop up and show up on your live stream to debate you, or on your channel with a comment if you criticize me openly. So I'm not gonna turn and act or like I'm above reproach in this area. I'm probably do exactly what he's doing at the moment. I would probably do exactly the same in his position. But the one thing that we do is we back up everything that we say. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at so long story short, if that's even possible now, because it's 10 minutes in and I haven't started. Long story short, is he's written a paper in response to my live stream, which I didn't think was the best thing to do, because he's omitted stuff from my second and third live stream. So I think he's only looked at or included only one of the live streams in this kind of critique, whereas the other live streams covered the same topic, but obviously allowed more time for us to look at different things. And also, he knew that I was in the process of putting a paper together, because he had actually recommended that. So I was like, okay, fine. Actually, rather than me doing just live stream. So at the moment, if you've noticed, I've been a little bit more quiet on the content production, is because actually writing papers is a really big thing that's in my roadmap at the moment. I think it's actually really important that I create referenceable material, and obviously the videos are great. They get out, they're fast, it's good, it's shareable medium. We reach and we touch people of different, people who would never reach. But also, I think, educators, children, even other academicians will find it useful if we start to publish, you know, using the academic format, things that we do. Many of my videos and many of my kind of insights and the things that we discuss on this channel are capable, very capable of being published. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. It is a lot of work, but I'm kind of using this as a gate and as an opportunity for me to start doing something that I knew I should have been doing anyway. So that's what I've been doing. So yeah, I've been a bit busy. You got the backdrop, but I'm going to be responding with my own papers published, and I've got some people who are kind of, you know, I've got a couple of friends, doctors, educators, publishers who have already agreed and offered to kind of proofread and possibly provide me with journals I can publish in if the work that I produce hits a certain standard. So it's good stuff. It's good stuff. Sometimes you're kind of dragged into these debates and discussions unknowingly, but at the same time, there's opportunity there for us to reach our branch. And actually, I love the fact that we're in this now very public debate, because once again, that's what we want, to be honest with you. The more public we get, they wouldn't be responding to us. Let's be honest with you. He wouldn't have been on all of my live streams and responded to me writing papers if he didn't know there wasn't credibility in what we're bringing. That's just the fact of the matter. They know that our arguments are sound and they're credible. It's exactly what happened with Metatron. He would not have responded. He would have carried on about his business, he carried on mocking. But when we responded, and we responded with such strong arguments, he had to change his position in the end. He had to adjust what he was doing. And actually, I give him credit for that. I know a lot of people don't like me giving him credit, but I do give him credit, because he changed his argument completely and actually had to concede in the end to say, hey, you know, actually, you guys are probably right. There were quite a lot of black people in ancient Egypt, but they just weren't all black. That was a massive move from ancient Egyptians were a mixed race of kind of like pale Arabic looking people, which is what he started with, who had been tanned by the sun. We had massive movement there. You know, so I'm always going to give credit to people who adjust their position, and I actually think there's potential in my discussions with Cicero, because we've been going back and forth. I'm not going to obviously show you the DM, but we've been going back and forth, and we're not holding back. I'm not, you know, patting him on the back, and, you know, I'm not criticizing him in public and then patting him on the back in secret. Now, the exact way I'm going to speak about him today, I've spoken to him directly. So that's good. He knows there's a degree, he knows there's integrity when it comes to dealing with me. I'm not going to praise his work. I've openly criticized him about lots of things, and I know a lot of these things really bothered him because some of them are true and there's nothing you can say about them. But at the same time, he's still willing to engage and have that back and forth, and I have to respect that as a person, because he doesn't have to, you know. So, you know, our arguments are strong, our arguments are credible. They can't ignore us like they used to. They have to take us seriously. And yeah, and it's only going to open more doors for us to grow into other avenues, and hence why I'm going to make sure that I dedicate the time to get these papers written and to do further. Because to me, that's just us branching into more territories, more avenues for our research and for our work to be taken seriously. So yeah, I think it's excellent. So yeah, that's where we are at the moment. It is a lot to deal with, I'm not going to lie, but you know, it's fine. I've got big shoulders. I'm happy to do it. You know, it's work that I love to do. Thank you, everyone. I am kind of keeping my eye on the comments. So thank you. Hit up the likes. Thanks for joining. We're going to dive straight in now. It's been 15 minutes of kind of me giving a bit of an introduction, but I think it's important for us to get context. Now that we've got that context, we're going to dive straight in. So I've given you all a link. Some of you might be reading the paper already, but we're going to go through his paper. And he's raised several points of criticism in this paper to my criticism. So this is a critique of his critique of my critique of his reconstructions. We've been here before, haven't we? It sounds like the whole Metatron story. I respond to his response to his response to my response, and now we haven't even got to the point where I've actually cooked up a paper yet. So imagine how deep this is going to go. But yeah, this is what we're going to be doing today. So I'm going to pull the paper up on the screen. We're going to go through it and we're going to address the points. Now, I have to say this really, this is quite important actually. When it comes to what's been said already, one of the things he gets really frustrated about, and you're going to read it, is the fact that he sent us papers during the live stream and we didn't read them. It's kind of like, dude, I'm in the middle of a live stream. And I think sometimes people don't really understand how much preparation and effort it gets to make one of these live streams and actually to stream it, and it's coherent and it can roll through, and I don't leave you guys hanging. As you know, I still leave you guys hanging sometimes when I'm searching for stuff and doing kind of live things, but it takes a lot. So I can't just, you know, sidestep everything that I'm doing and just read a paper. You know, hi guys, I have no ideas what's in this paper, I'm just going to read, you know, 6 pages of prose to you. That's not going to happen. So you have to allow me time to, if you introduce something new, it's likely I'm going to take it away, read it, and come back in another live stream and be able to include it. So it's just about being, you know, just have, you know, be realistic about your expectations. You know, you can't just shove something under someone's face and expect them to instantly respond to it. You need time to digest and to formulate your, you know, responses. So that's the reason why. But now I have had a chance to do that. So we're going to dive in. Okay, let's dive in. Welcome all, and thank you for the support. Okay, so I think we're here. Okay, let me just drag this onto the screen. This is going to be our main window of work. Here we are. Okay, so here is the paper that he's written. It's on ResearchGate, and actually I have to once again give him a bit of commendation because he's recommended that I publish my responses on ResearchGate, which is hopefully shouldn't be too difficult to get my response published. Download the PDF. See, this is one of the things I was thinking, have I done this before? I would normally do this before. Maybe it is actually open in PDF. Maybe I'm just being silly. Oh, there it is. Let's open it. I think I did have it open. I might have closed it. The amount of windows I've got open. Okay, here we go. All right, so here's the paper. My answers to King's monologue on Amenhotep III's facial approximation. Actually, so before we dive in, for those of you who are new to this is the facial approximation that he created of Amenhotep III. Okay. Now, as you can imagine, I thought it was horrible. Now, I didn't think it was horrible just because I was being, you know, facetious. I thought it was horrible because to me there was zero consistency, obviously, with the artwork, which in my view is, you know, very, very clearly descriptive of someone with a black African phenotype. And if they were, you know, if they had those features, if they were clearly that person with these black African features in this, while, you know, if they looked white like this, and he's also very adamant that this is not a white person, and we're going to disprove that together today, and he's going to be quite disappointed. You know, this is a white person. I know he really doesn't want to admit that this is a white person. In his mind, this is a dark-skinned person. In fact, you're going to see in the paper he actually thinks this person is more dark-skinned than me. I kid you not. He says that. He says that this person, and he reiterated that to me. He said to me, my reconstruction, this person here is darker than you, and I've proved it. And it was at that point I said, you're either stupid or dishonest, and I've been talking with you long enough to know that you're not stupid, so therefore you're dishonest, and I don't want to talk to you anymore. That's what I literally had to say to him. We did carry on talking after that, but you can understand my frustration having to say that. Point being, this is his reconstruction is totally inconsistent, and I actually think it's taken quite a lot of kind of like malinterpretation and manipulation of the mummy to even get it to a stage where it looks like this. Now he'll argue that his process is forensic. We're going to kind of decide and see what forensic is and what forensic actually means, so that we can then, you know, critique this correctly and say, is this an accurate reconstruction, or is it a case that this is not an accurate reconstruction? Okay, so let's start off. So I think we were, let me close that down. I don't need that open. So yeah, my Discord, that's probably taking loads of memory. Sorry, no, where are we? Lost my trail of thought. Is it here? Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down. We're now in the paper. Okay, and I think I can zoom in a bit from here as well. So let's zoom in a bit so you guys can read along. Excellent. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly read the super chat. From Henry, said, can you review Inyenzi's Bantu Kemet La? You know what, I think, is that the girl? I think I'm subscribed to her, if it is who I'm thinking it is. I really like her videos that she does. I think they're really excellent. At the moment I'm still kind of, if it's the girl that I'm thinking of, she's making a few videos on the topic and they're all really good, but obviously before I introduce anything to the channel, I'm still in the vetting process in terms of the content. But I think if it is the person that I think you're speaking about, so far what I've seen I really like. I might not do a review right away, but I'll imagine I'll do one soon. I think what I've seen so far looks really good. So thank you for sharing that, and everyone who's seen it, do check the videos out. They are really interesting, actually, and very enlightening, and they told me some stuff about the Bantu that I had no idea whatsoever. So very, very enlightening. Let's go. This document is a formal response to the live broadcast on the King's Monologue channel about our work on the facial approximation of Pharaoh Amenhotep III. The video, entitled Mainstream Egyptology Just Lost All Credibility. Gotta love the titles. Is available online. Has content that is highly critical of our work and is mainly focused on these points. So this is his opinion, by the way. One, that the statues and artistic images made by the ancient Egyptians should be used as a structural basis for facial approximation. That's absolutely a point I stand by, and I believe I prove that when I do my reconstructions. They can be age adjusted downwards and upwards and match the younger and older statues of Pharaoh Amenhotep or any other pharaoh that I've reconstructed to that point, proving that these are statues of the same person being tracked through their age. Okay, I've shown that on multiple occasions. Do have a look through my shorts and my longs. In fact, let's have a quick I wasn't planning to do this. Let's just have a quick peek on my latest short. The reason why I want to do this is because it's only a short. Okay, it's literally a minute long. It's a bit of a joke. By the way, I was really shocked at how many people took this seriously. King Charles, I actually said King Charles. I always said I'd never call him King Charles. Never unveiled my reconstruction of Amenhotep III. Okay, guys, it was supposed to deliberately look like a bad edit. It literally is just supposed to be a bit of a viral video and a bit of a joke. Okay, I repeated the same footage 7 times, so no one should have been taking that seriously and kind of like posting, oh, the truth is coming out, Charles is you have to kind of understand my sense of humor there, guys. It's just a viral video, so don't take it seriously, please. It's not real. But I'm gonna actually show everyone that now, because actually this will be a good way for us to kind of just broach the topic and also see his reconstruction, see my reconstruction, and this is a good starting point. So let's do that. Let's do this together. I always have the best, when I do these live streams, there's always the best laid plans kind of go out the window, because I just end up doing these mad freestyles. Okay, so let me just pull up my channel here, King's Monologue, and I'm just going to go to my shorts here, and it should be here it is, this one over here. This will be a good way for us to kind of like see everything in a nutshell that I'm kind of, or at least that first point. Well, it's a bit freezy.
Were you aware that the greatest single man-made structure ever built resides in Africa?
Go back, calm down.
Is it possible to consolidate the many...
Okay, this is really lagging.
Goddamn, keep them high as fuck, bro. Man, this shit.
So there you go. There's one of my first reconstructions. Okay, very famous statue of Amenhotep III. There. There's the other one. This one's in the British Museum. Okay, slightly older, and you can see he's put on some weight, but you can still see consistency, no change in the facial structure. Just used AI to help me fatten him up a little bit, literally just added weight. That's all it is. This is naturally what the last person would look like if they was a bit older and a bit thicker. There's the hairstyle, okay, with the crown, so you can see it there. That's a completely different, this is a bas relief, a completely different application, but once again, this is Amenhotep Young, and this is an example of what I was talking about before. So when I was speaking to you earlier, this young Amenhotep is literally just the older reconstruction, age adjusted downwards. And if you have a look at that versus this statue of a young Amenhotep, to me, you have total consistency. So when they make this claim that, oh, the statues are just artistic, what did they do? Did the pharaohs have a body double who they'd get to stand in for them for all of their, all of their artworks? Because this is the kind of mental gymnastics that you have to do to claim that the statues bear no relevance to what the pharaohs look like. Because he's used the word standardized art style, and the problem with that is that anybody who takes even just a little bit of time understanding or studying the artwork of ancient Egypt, be it Old, Middle or New Kingdom, knows that will be easily able to tell the pharaohs apart from one another, because they look the same in all their statues. There's not a single statue of Ramesses II where he looks like Amenhotep III. There's not a single statue of Akhenaten where he looks like Amenhotep. There's not a single statue of Amos where he looks like Amenhotep. There's not a single statue of Thutmose III that doesn't look like Thut. They all look the same. Young Tutankhamen statues all look the same, from youth to adulthood, or as you say, young adulthood. They all look exactly the same. They don't look like anybody else, and that includes his golden mask. So people have said, oh, the golden mask wasn't made for him. Well, that face on the golden mask doesn't match any other pharaoh. It looks like him. It's the same face that you see on the funerary guards, same face that you see on the mannequin. It's the same features. So when they try to make this claim, oh, it was just a consistent artistic style, well, then you have to then explain why they were consistent throughout their life, from youth to adulthood. These people had the same face. You have to back that up. Okay, it's impossible for you to make that claim. Let me just make a quick thank you to Pepwin7, who's made a donation, $20. Thank you very much, and you're always giving, and I really appreciate that. Bro, here come the haters. You make all kinds of sense with your logic. It's right. You'll get more. Stay strong, brother, and never doubt. One love. Thank you. Really appreciate the support in more ways than one. And yeah, we don't worry about the haters. The haters can stay all they want, because we're not here to debate with haters. We're just here to present our logic, like you said. So anyway, back to this video. Let me let it play. So you see a profile view, the same reconstruction once again. Okay, I've done the crown as natural hair. For those of you who want a bit of background about the crowns being natural hair, I have a very extensive video on the topic. It's a documentary. It's about I can't remember how long it is. I think it's about 26 minutes. It's about nearly half an hour long, but it's worthwhile watching. If you haven't watched my video on the crowns of Kemet, I really do advise you to watch it, so you can kind of understand that all of the crowns of Kemet represented natural hair, and this is just one of them. So you can see it here from profile view, and you can see features once again stay the same. Bear in mind that these features are the same features that you saw from the front. Okay, same features, same face. Even on the stele artworks, you're still getting, and the papyrus, you're still getting those same features carrying through. Now this I did obviously for the benefit of the live stream, and the fact that Cicero said these aren't compatible. 'Cause that's one of the arguments that you'll hear made constantly. The skull is not compatible with the features, and to me it's quite important to show, actually, well, I can show you the skull from profile view, I can show you it from front view, and it looks very compatible to me. Yes, we are definitely there's a difference in the process, and I know that you rate your process of facial approximation, which we're going to cover, by the way, quite highly, but I think that the whole the whole argument of incompatibility is invalid, because it can't be incompatible until you've tried it is the bottom line, you know. And we know that you make choices in regards to the tissue data that you use, and I know you're going to say, well, that's not our process, because they mix a couple of processes where they kind of mix Manchester method with the Russian method, which we're going to go over in the video today. But they mix a few methods to get what, but the bottom line is it's still the same thing. They have a donor, and the donor is made up from a assumption that has been made about the ethnicity. Okay, there has to be an assumption made about the ethnicity. It has to be done. There's no way they can cut. It's not like they've got a one size fits all where the tissue data can just like be the same. No, it's different depending on the ethnic group, and that decision is always made before the reconstruction. Okay, so that's really important to note. Okay, so I showed the overlay to show actually this skull is very compatible with the African phenotype. And then from front view as well, you can see the skull is very compatible position wise. So that is quite noteworthy, because people think that can be done easily, and it can't. Okay, the point is that this face is consistent with the statues and the artwork, and it's consistent shape wise with the skull. Are there going to be slight imperfections in the approach? Yes, but there's going to be slight imperfections in every facial approximation approach. And shoving the word forensic doesn't make something as subjective as facial approximation suddenly become science. It's never going to be a science. It's always going to be an art. And I know that he'll take exception to that, but that is just the facts of the matter. It's always going to be an art. It's an art that gets more and more accurate the more data that you're given. So the more data you're given about sex, ethnicity, etc., even familial links, the closer you can get to basically having a picture of the person, the more accurate it gets. So, and it gets further and further from that, the further you get from that. So anyway.
Goddamn, keep
Okay, so there you go. There's the video. You've seen it. Okay. That's the basis of our difference. Let's carry on diving into that paper that we've started. Okay, so I think where are we? I can close this down now. I have to close the windows down after me, otherwise my PC won't last. Okay, so the statues and the artistic images made by the ancient Egyptians should be used as a structural basis for facial approximation. Okay, so that's what he said there. That's what he said. I say, and that's true. He made facial approximations more coherent with the pharaohs. I'm going to say more coherent with the artwork, but yes. DNA proves Amenhotep is a black African. No, that's not an argument that I made. My argument was that anthropology needs to be taken as a whole, and the genetic argument was not the only argument that I made. I also gave you an argument based on anthropometrics, and I also gave you another argument based on craniometrics. So that's three areas of physical and genealogical anthropology that I provided, that all together, each of them taken separately, came back with this person is of central or continental or black African origin. Okay, we had the DNA, which said he was 94%, match probability. It is a probability basis with black Africans. We had the anthropometric that said he was he had negroid proportions, and he was very, very distant from white proportions. And then finally we had the craniometrics, which looked at the fact that the skull is looks relatively dolichocephalic, and also there's some of the dental traits which are very, very common amongst Eastern Africans. So these things taken together with the fact that they portray black Africans on the statues. That's kind of like 4 really huge red flags that we should be approaching this person as an African. So let's perhaps utilize the African donor and actually see if we can build a more African face. Okay, that's what we should be doing. Okay, that's exactly what we should be doing. We shouldn't be doing anything else. You certainly shouldn't be approaching this like it's totally blind and just kind of, which is what's being done. And actually you'll see with his professional work, which he does kind of hark on about quite a lot in this paper, he never approaches it totally blind. He's always got a basis, a starting point, which makes his outcome more accurate. But we'll get into that in a moment. This document clarifies some questions and refutes some points, basically as follows. One second, I'm just going to scroll up, make sure I haven't missed anything. No. Okay, cool. I know some people probably asking me questions. I can't. Okay, Enki Lil, you've been going on. So, and I don't even know how people highlight their questions. So let's see what your question is. So, did you see my comment on your video about the evolution of hair combs in Egypt over time from Afro picks to wide combs? I did. I haven't had a chance to look into it yet. Okay, so that's my answer to your question. I haven't looked into it yet, but I certainly will. So thanks for asking the question. Okay, let me carry on. This document clarifies some questions and refutes some points, basically as follows. The statues and works of art do not serve as a reference for facial features. Why not? As they are not compatible with known skulls. Not true. Such as Tutankhamen. Entirely untrue. Entirely untrue. I literally proved in my last live stream that King Tutankhamun's skull is a typical Nilotic African. Typically Nilotic African. In fact, he's not compatible with your reconstruction, I would argue, with a great deal of reverence. He has dental traits that are entirely consistent with people of East Africa, such as the Kikuyu, the Maasai, okay, who came up in that study, and I posted the study to prove that they have these dental traits at a rate of between 80 and 99%. His exact teeth, overbite, overjet, diastema. He has all 3 of those traits, and all 3 of those traits are commonplace amongst East Africans. Okay, he has a anthropometrically African body with, you know, negroid limb proportions as proven by the paper that I showed you, and in addition to that, he has very African DNA. And yet you've come out with this claim that, oh, the known skulls are not, they're entirely consistent. Okay, so this is just a statement here that you're not backing up. I don't believe you've ever attempted to make, and this is my whole issue, you haven't ever attempted to make it work. And this is the issue that you have. Ramesses II also, I'm going to say, in fact, let's just have a bit of a visual support for what we're saying here. So it's not just me talking, let's have some visual support for this. So going back to my original point, okay, we're going to kind of like dart between visuals, okay, and the paper as much as we can, as much as possible. Okay, if you don't mind, I'm just going to disappear comments on the screen now. Thank you very much for those of you who did donate. I'm going to scroll in here. So I like to go to this one because you've seen it before if you've been on my channel for a while. And the question I'll ask to my community here is, out of these 6 people on display, the 6 people, front and side view, which one is the true African? Who's the most mixed? Who's the most unmixed? Which features on here do you regard as African or not African? Because I'm sure you know already, because we covered this already, these people are all Rwandan. Okay, it's not even like I've picked people from different tribes and different, you know, people from all over. These people are all Rwandan. Okay, these are all Kenya Rwandan speakers. These are all Banya Rwandan people. Okay, so they're all of the same ethnic stock, and yet look at the diversity that you're dealing with here. Okay, you have a diversity of head shapes. You have strong dolichocephaly to mesocephalic people. You have strong subnasal prognathism, as shown in this man down here, to up here, where this person is perfectly orthognathic, okay, which means that he has no prognathism. perfectly orthographic, something that would be regarded as a European trait. And Wildflower, you are correct. All of them are Africans, none of them are mixed, and none of them are more black or African than the other. These people are all Africans. Okay? You have this one up here with almost a slightly hook nose, very similar actually to Ramesses' mummy. Okay? Very similar facial features to Ramesses' mummy. Okay? Very thin lips. You have this one here is retrographic. Okay? That's when your jawline actually recedes. So we have prognathism, orthographic, retrographic, all black Africans. What do you think this one's skull looks like? What do you think his skull looks like when he's mummified? I think we all know the answer to the question. They would regard his skull as being European. They'd say, oh, well, it's retrographic, and look at the nose. The nose is not that wide. The nose is relative. I mean, it's quite narrow from the front. Okay? This person is 100% African, the same as all of the people on this page. The ones who exhibit the features that have been associated with Africans. And remember, I've said it to you before, the only reason they associate wide nose and bigger lips with Africans is because they do not access them. It's not because of any other reason. Okay? It's because they don't access it, and they only will give to Africa, they will only give to black people the things they don't access. They'll say, okay, yeah, this person is definitely African, but anything they access suddenly becomes Caucasoid. This man will be described as Caucasoid. They would find his skull and they'd say he was white or mixed. He's not. He's African. He's fully African. He's as African as the people with these features. He's not mixed at all. But that's exactly, okay, that's exactly how it works when it comes to the way they deal with anthropology amongst African people. So it's really important that we have that clear understanding of where we're coming from. Now, just to dive on that point, to talk about Ramesses really quickly. So he said Ramesses is not compatible. That was his statement. Ramesses is not compatible. So for those of you who haven't seen, this is my latest reconstruction of Ramesses. I'm just going to put it on the screen. Now, once again, I'm not going to claim that I've followed forensic facial approximation. This is once again me making a reconstruction of Ramesses to look as closely like his statue as possible. So there's his statue. To be honest with you, I used about 6 of Ramesses' statues to get this to get this reconstruction. Okay, so there's his statue. Okay, and there is my reconstruction based on numerous statues that I've overlaid. Okay, statue, facial reconstruction. Now, here's the mummy that he said is not compatible. Okay, here's my facial reconstruction, just age adjusted upwards, and obviously I've done the hair to help you kind of see how close those could be. Okay, to say that these are not compatible, who's ever made the attempt? Is it in his mind like that black people can't have a hook nose or can't have that kind of nose that we just saw on the Rwandan person? I hope he's not thinking that Ramesses has got naturally blonde hair, because we know that this is yellow because of henna. Ramesses' hair was completely white because he was 92 years old, but I've kind of demonstrated that here. And this is just very East African hair. It's wavy, it's been compressed. This is what happens to most black people when they get old. Their hair becomes very, very wiry, and you only need to cover it overnight with a do-rag for it to look like this, let alone for 3,000 years. Okay, and to put the boot in, his skin is very, very dark, and we know that it's not caused by bitumen. It's not caused by tar in the compounds. So you have to explain the darkness and why that doesn't happen to other mummies which aren't initially melanated people. So I raised that point to say, you know, you're making an assumption, oh, it's not compatible with the statues. Says who? Has anyone tried to make? When I made this reconstruction, I wasn't trying to make it compatible with the mummy, but well, looky here, aren't they quite close? And by the way, we kind of have very good indication to know that Ramesses' nose was even broken, so it shouldn't be that pronounced. And I'll just show you proof of that actually really quickly, just so we're clear. So here's profile view of Ramesses. This is a reconstruction that they've done, by the way. So I love this view actually, because this tells you really, really quickly why they don't like to use the artwork. To me, this makes it really clear why they don't like to use the artwork. This makes it really clear why they don't like to use the artwork. Because if you look over here at this reconstruction and you compare it with this very obviously melanated African who's on the artwork. I mean, sometimes when you see the artwork in isolation, you don't see how much it's portraying an African until you compare it with a non-African. Okay, so there's a reconstruction, and by the way, I don't think this is Cicero's reconstruction, so I'm not accusing him of doing this. But the point being that they felt the need to make it look like this because of the mummy. But if you actually look at the statue has a very pronounced nose. But there was no attempt to try and give it these features, because these features are too African. So it's kind of like, oh no, we're going to ignore that. This is just all artistic. It's got nothing to do with anything. No one is using the artwork. They know exactly why they're not using it as well. And just to drive home the point about it being, the nose being broken, you can see there, this is a section scan, and you can see where the nose is broken there. You can see it. So that part of the bridge that they make so much of a big deal about probably sat lower, probably sat underneath here. But at the moment it sits up there because it was broken, and they used to break it so they could extract the brain as part of the mummification process to stop that from decaying. So we know the nose has been broken. We can see it on this section scan. Okay, so it's not just a speculation about whether Ramesses' nose is broken. It definitely was broken. Okay, and that's what caused it to look the way it looks. But no one is trying to make Ramesses, because in their mind, oh, this can't be an African. Yet he's got some of the strongest dolichocephaly, by the way, that you'll ever find in Ramesses. I think he's like 70%. So he's got a really dolichocephalic head. Okay, and in fact, let me just show you some of the possibilities for Ramesses' appearance if you take into account African diversity, which is something they don't like to do. So here's another depiction that I've created of Ramesses, okay, based on this hairstyle. Once again, Ramesses again, and once again trying to be consistent, using the same reconstruction, not changing it with each statue. And so far I found every statue of Ramesses I'm able to create a side-by-side comparison, and it looks like the reconstruction. So why would you not use that as a starting base? Why would you not? Okay, let me now close that down and carry on. And once again, have a look at that profile. Okay, have a look at that profile and look at what we just saw with Ramesses' mummy. How different do you think they were features wise? In fact, let me just pull that side by side, because I think that's probably a good place for us to kind of look and see. So let me just pull that side by side with Ramesses' mummy, because it's probably good for us to see. Minimize that. Okay, just have those side by side, bearing in mind that nose is broken. Okay, not very far, is it, feature wise? Very close. We have a slightly longer alveolar region, but that happens when the nose shrinks. But if you have this mindset that all black people come in one shape and size, and you're like, oh, well, it's not compatible, the statues are black and the mummy's white. No, afraid not. These are very common African features, very common. Right, so all this talk of incompatibility, yeah, I'm not there for it. Let's carry on. Despite the effort, I'm working well with 2D computer graphics. The King's monologue did not make. He calls me what does he call me in this? He calls me I don't know, we'll come across it. It's got a funny name for me that I find hilarious. But the King's Monologue did not make forensic facial approximations. It is more of an artistic work, not based on anatomical match and statistical data used in forensic field. Absolutely. I'm not going to deny that. I start with the artwork. Okay? I start with the artwork, and then the process of making it match with the mummy is very much something that comes afterwards, but it's something that I never find very difficult. Now, where I'll just put a quid pro quo is that regardless of how you're getting to your how you're getting to your final result and how I'm getting to my final result, we are both artists. So let's not kid anyone here. You can call it forensic all you want, but you're just an artist, okay? And the difference between art and science is that art is subjective and science is objective. If it was a science, then you could do a reconstruction or give a skull to 100 different people and it'd come out with the same facial approximation. But what you'll do right now is if you give a skull to 100 different forensic artists, they will come out with 100 different reconstructions. That is a fact. And it's a fact because it's not a science. It never has been a science. It's an art. It is an art that you can get more and more accurate with over time, and I do think there's definitely credence to your works. I'm definitely not criticizing and saying it has no value. That definitely wasn't my approach, but the point is that you get much more accurate results if you take the full realm of anthropology into your decision making, which is something that I don't think you're doing at the moment, which is where we've kind of fallen into disagreement, just like I've just kind of shown. Number 3, there are problems related to the use of DNA results in relation to defining Amenhotep III as Black African. Well, DNA wasn't my only string, okay? Like I've just explained, I gave you DNA, I gave you anthropometrics, I gave you craniometrics, and I gave you statues. That's 4 strands of anthropology there that I've given you. 4, okay? And you've chosen to focus on DNA. And I never try to prove, and actually you've made errors, but we'll come across the errors you've made when we get there. I don't want to kind of like beleaguer the point. Let me carry on. I must document that despite the differences in approach and criticism, when I participated in a live with comments, both the King's Monologue and I have behaved politely within the limits of good coexistence. Absolutely. It's professional. It's not personal. I used an automatic subtitle generation system to collect words spoken by the King's Monologue during the live. If there's any error, please let me know in order to comment on them. Okay, so that's the kind of intro out the way. We're getting there, guys. I have a feeling we're just not going to get there. This feels like when I was debunking Metatron's video. It's just going to take a whole lot longer than I hope, but I'm not staying awake too late, so we might have to part to it. But let's carry on anyway. So it gets funny now here because he starts quoting me word for word, and as I read back, I was like, yeah, that was harsh. I can't help it. I talk the way I talk, deal with it. Do these phony baloney agendered BS with clearly no level of accuracy and no degree of acknowledgement to the actual ancient Egyptians themselves. They ignore every something when they do their reconstructions. They ignore all the realms of anthropology, they ignore all of the data, and they do their reconstructions in isolation just based on looking at the skull. Okay, it was harsh, it was 100% harsh, but let's be honest with you, I'm not going to take back a word I've said there. I absolutely stand by that. You're relying solely on the skull when you have literally a plateau of anthropological data that could help you to guide you to a better outcome. And you've done this previously as well. This is what bothers me. You've done this previously with the Nazlet Qatar reconstruction, which you've sent to me, which I'll show to everybody on the live stream. You did it with your second Nenre Tar reconstruction, which you sent to me also. I'll show that to the audience as well. So you can take anthropology into account when it suits you, but you've chosen not to. And once again, I will put that down to the fact, well, I'm not going to say the fact, the assumption that you knew what you were supposed to produce in this one. That's the assumption I'm going to put it down to. But let's carry on. So let's see what he said in response to that little bit of a rant that I gave him there. We do not ignore data. In fact, We developed a technique with more structural accuracy, which will be presented later. For now, I will show a case of facial approximation carried out in 2016 using the oldest technique, which led to recognition of a crime victim. In other words, the technique was used in real forensic case and was published in an academic journal. This itself refutes the idea there was no accuracy in the methodology. Now, to be clear, if I said there was no accuracy in the methodology, I was saying that in isolation in terms of the way that you're using it in historical anthropology and the way that you ignore the anthropology to make your decision. You ignore everything around you and you just go, no, everything's crap. We don't want statues. We don't want, we don't want genetics. We don't want the fact that this person is anthropometrically and craniometrically a black African and looks like all of the other black Africans around here. Oh, that's rubbish. Just give me the skull and I'll make a face from it. It doesn't work that way. And we're definitely never going to agree when you have that. However, like you've said, you have used your techniques with the police to help, but I want to show this to my audience to give them the full context of this claim that you've made here, because it's a very strong claim. Okay, you've used these same techniques and they've helped to solve crimes. Brilliant. Let's get under the hood of this. I want to quickly, so if you just bear with me, audience, I want to quickly pop over to this paper. Okay, I want to have a read of this paper and I kind of want to show you show you this claim that he's made regarding this, which is a fair claim. Thank you, Nehesi, for the $9.99. It's much appreciated. You never left a comment, but I appreciate you very much. So let me pull this up on the screen so we can all see. I think I've got it open here. I hope I got it open here. No, that's not it. That's not it. I think this is it. Yes, I think this is it. 3D forensic facial approximation, implementation of protocol in forensic activity. Yes, I think this is it. So this is the paper. So guys, bear with me, okay? We're going to read through this together, and it's kind of important that we just have a, understanding of how he gets to where he gets to. But I wanted to kind of like highlight some points to you. So I'm just going to zoom in. Bear with me as I find my zoom button. Control plus will not do it. Okay, cool. So zoomed in. So the primary objective of this paper, bear with me guys please, is to report on the successful implementation of forensic facial approximation in a real case of in the forensic context. The three-dimensional facial approximation protocol of the skull was performed with free software, applying techniques in a virtual environment that have already been consolidated in the literature. The skull was scanned with photogrammetry technique. The digital replica was imported into the Blender software, blah, 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 blah. And individualized model sketches of the face were traced with the Make Human software according to the anthropological profile of the victim. That's what I wanted you to see. Okay, guys? What does it say there? According to the anthropological profile of the victim. This wasn't blind. That's really important that you need to understand this, guys. It wasn't blind. They had an anthropological profile of the victim. I'm not saying they had a photograph, but they knew, based on the anthropology, who they were recreating. They knew the sex of the person. They knew the ethnicity of the person. They had this, and it made their results much more accurate. Let me carry on. The face was created in Blender, where it was adapted, modeled and sculpted on a 3D skull and its soft tissue markers. Using an American open source application of the technique in the digital environment, the face created in the virtual environment was recognized and legal identification procedures were started, resulted in the more agile delivery of the disappeared body to its next of kin. Okay, so it's an excellent piece of work that was done there. I'm definitely not going to undermine it, but let's carry on, because this is quite important. It's therefore concluded that the facial approximation may not be the primary method of human identification, but it can be. So listen here. It can't be the primary method of human identification. Okay, listen, but it can be satisfactorily applied in the forensic field as an individual recognition resource. It has great value in narrowing the search, reducing the number of alleged victims, and leading to identification tests, therefore significantly reducing the number of genetic DNA tests which are considered costly for the state federation, and consequently reducing waiting time before delivery of the body to its family. So what we're talking about here is utilizing it in a case where we've got a spread of candidates, so to speak, okay, with known ethnicity, etc., and we're going to say which ones end up looking like or being compatible with the victim and which ones aren't. Okay, this is a much more informed process than what we're dealing with in historical anthropology. Okay, if you're dealing with two victims, so to speak, you know, two Jane Does, two missing people, okay, and you have the skull and you don't know which one it is, but you have the ethnicity of each, this is a very, very credible method for them to find out who the victim was, which one was correct. Absolutely. Okay, this isn't the case of kind of like, you know, Maria Consuela was missing and a skull popped up somewhere. She's been missing since, you know, 1980, and a skull popped up somewhere, and they gave it to Cicero and team, and they reconstructed the face, and then the family were like, oh my god, it's Maria, look, they found her, oh my god. Well, this isn't the case of that. This isn't one of those things. Okay, this is a very kind of like limited in its outcomes. All right, and what happened is this is aided and obviously provided lots of value to the police force in being able to solve this crime or solve a number of crimes and to get an identification quicker. But it's based on being informed. Okay, it's an informed reconstruction. So, and once again, I'm not undermining its value. I'm just once again making it clear that you're applying kind of two different fields here. Yes, it adds credibility to what you do, but don't act like it's the same thing, because they're very, very different, and actually probably adds rigor to the point, or at least adds weight to the argument that I'm making, is that the more anthropological data you're given about the victim, or the subject I should say, and the closer you're going to get to a accurate outcome. I'm not going to read this whole paper. I just wanted to read there is a part where it mentions the fact that they're given all of the data that's needed. So here we go. Materials and methods. One human skull was submitted by the legal authorities to Forensic Science Department in order to assist with the investigative process. The skull had been found along with the bone remains and clothes in a rural area without a wallet or documents that could not point to its civil identity. Through the methods of estimating sex, qualitative analysis of the morphological structure and structural bone characteristics, craniometry, and analysis of discriminatory functions, age, blah blah blah, and ancestry, analysis of cranioscopic characteristics, the bioanthropological profile was estimated by the forensic medicine department. Okay, so do you see that, guys? This is the important part that I was mentioning. Okay, there has to be this level of investigation that takes place to undertake and to understand the ancestry, ethnicity, age. All of these things should be identified prior to this being undertaken. It's like when it comes to the ancient Egyptians, like, oh well, you know, Amenhotep III, oh, he could be anything. Let's just pull some random third, you know, just any ethnicity. Let's just pull. They said he's Egyptian, we'll make an Egyptian. There's no anthropological basis. We're providing you with the anthropological information that you should know, that should help you to ascertain that you should be building an African person and not a Turkish/British person, which is what you built. The bioanthropological profile was estimated in accordance with the techniques applied in forensic anthropology as a human skull, adult male with an estimated age between blah 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 blah, blah and predominantly Caucasian ethnicity. Okay, so there you go. I'm not going to go into that with too much detail. Okay, you've got an idea there. So once again, like I've said, it's what he's doing here. I'm not going to undermine it. I have no position or place to undermine it, but I will say it's good to know in context really what was being achieved and how it's different to what's being done here. Okay, it's really important to understand that. Let's carry on. Now, this is where it gets slightly humorous. I said need to be aware of the skin tone range. You may need to be aware of the local phenotypic. You just kind of cut off my sentence there. I can't remember exactly what I said, but then, and he's done this. It's funny the word serious is below here because you guys need to see what he's done here. This is when it does get slightly bizarre. Okay. I hope you guys can see this. Okay, so screenshot from the King's Monologue live with skin color samples. So he's taken a sample from the face of I'm trying not to laugh here, guys. He's taken a sample from the face of Amenhotep III, okay, found a dark brown pixel over here, and then he's taken a sample of my hand where it's lighter, and he's used this to suggest that his reconstruction is darker than me. Now, you have to understand, I was very shocked when he made this argument. I was really shocked. I actually messaged him and was like, dude, like, I like, seriously, are you sure you don't want to retract this? I was like, this argument you're making is a really asinine and stupid argument, okay? It's clearly a very pale person. You could put them in dark lighting, and even then, you could clearly see that I approximate much darker than your reconstruction here. You selected a single pixel where perhaps your reconstruction has a black head on their face or something, and use that as a basis to say that he's darker than me and that this person isn't white. It's all in my imagination. He stood by this argument, so I did give him the chance, guys. I did give him the chance to retract this. So just for this isn't even for giggles, but just to kind of like to really push the point that he's raised a blinder here. I don't know how to argue against this one, to be honest with you. He's kind of proved it. So here's another image I found. Yeah, a white dude and a black dude, but actually the black guy is much lighter. It's an illusion. It's a visual illusion because actually, as you can see, this pixel here on the cheek of the white guy is this very deep and rich brown, but this pixel on the black guy's forehead is cream. So this, by Cicero's logic, proves that this dark-skinned black guy is actually much lighter skinned than this white guy. Okay, there, it's proof. It's proof. So we've all been getting fooled, right? Your eyes are, in fact, it's actually rude and politically incorrect to describe this guy as dark skinned now. He's a lighty. So I want everyone to just appreciate that this guy is what we'd call a red bone, all right? This guy over here is what we'd call, you know, a dark skin. So actually, this guy's black and this guy's white. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. He made the argument, guys. I mean, we're having a bit of fun here, but he made this argument. It's unbelievable. He made that argument. Hitflix, you are spot on. Highlights and shadows. You know, it kind of like you wouldn't have to explain this. And this is where I get the level. This is where I said you're being dishonest. I had to say this at this point because it's kind of like, you're a graphic designer, so you know how highlights and shadows work. You know how all of this works. Okay, you know how all of this works. Like, it doesn't even require explanation. You can pick a pixel. Like, what's the next thing? You'll pick a pixel from his teeth and say the black guy's a ghost. Like, what are we doing here? what are we doing here? This is absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, that's the argument he raised. So there you go. I've just kind of like, I don't really know what to say to that argument. I think like I said, he's got me there. I'm done. I'm stumped. It turns out his reconstruction is certainly darker than me. That's the argument he was making. Now, on a serious note, your reconstruction is, you can't put a white person in a black background and put them under some dim exposure and then use that as a basis for saying that no, they're dark skinned, they're not white, because skin complexions don't work that way. Okay, complexions don't work that way. In fact, complexions work quite simple. All human beings are on a brown spectrum. Some people have undertones of like yellow, some people have undertones of red, undertones of green, but the predominant color of all human beings is we are on a brown spectrum. It can actually be, it's funny because I actually had a discussion about this very recently on my Discord, but there's actually a scale called the Fitzpatrick scale, okay, where, you know, it's kind of like that's the scientific, if you're going to use the word science, that we seem to be using a lot, you know, you're not a scientist or whatever, forensic or this, that and the other. Well, there's the Fitzpatrick scale, so I can kind of just share that with you guys really quickly. All right, and this is the scale for determining complexions. So if I just pull that up, here it is. So here's the Fitzpatrick scale for determining complexions. Okay, now every day of the week I'm going to equate somewhere between 5 and 6, or possibly just 6. Okay, the reconstruction that you've created, irrespective of how much you want to desaturate, you know, make it, put it in a dimly lit room and put black behind it, irrespective of all that, you are going to fall, that reconstruction is going to fall somewhere between type 1 and type 2. I think it will even be hard to put it in type 3, because what you're failing to understand is complexion is not determined by lightness and darkness, so to speak. It's really determined by how deeply pigmented you are. They're two different things. So the moment someone reaches towards being pastel, i.e. the melanin or the colors drawn out of them, you can make the picture dimmer or lighter all you want, but the human mind and the eye is able to interpret the fact that this is a pale person. Okay, pale. So the key word here is pale, not necessarily light. It's pale. This is a pale person. So you can pick the dark pixel all you want, but this is a type 1, type 2. Okay, it's not a type 4 or type 5. You can darken the room all you want, but it's not going to make a skin any richer. It's not going to invite any more color saturation or pigmentation into his skin. He's a depigmented person. Okay, this person is very lightly pigmented, and so they're going to be at the very top end. So whether or not you like it, under the Fitzpatrick scale, type 1, type 2 and type 3 are determined as white. This is a white person, and I know you don't like to hear it, but that is the fact. You recreated a white person. And there's nothing wrong with white people, obviously. But the point I'm making is that you don't want your reconstruction to be defined as white, but by the Fitzpatrick scale, it's defined as white. Is there another scale we could use? Yes, there is. There's also the Harris Plex scale. And this is the scale that's actually utilized by geneticists. So for those of you who've seen the reconstruction of Cheddar Man, okay, Cheddar Man was one of the early Brits, and he was reconstructed to be a black person. The way they came up with that reconstruction is they run their genetic data through this very algorithm, which is called the Harris-Plex, which allows you to run genetic data through, autosomal data through it, and it will approximate what the complexion of that person is based on the alleles that are present or not present within the genome. Okay, and the reason I just bring that up really quickly is because Cheddar Man came in this last one, which is dark to black skin color. Okay, but there's only 5 different skin color ranges in the Harris-Plex. I'm going to zoom in quickly so you can all see this. So I know this is getting a bit technical, but it's really important that we kind of understand this. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the 5 options when it comes to skin color. Cheddar Man was here, dark to black skin color, I would probably be here, dark skin color. Okay, then you have intermediate skin color, pale skin color, very pale skin color. Yours is not an intermediate between dark skin. It's going to be pale or very pale. That's where your reconstruction is going to lie. So it doesn't matter what gymnastics you want to, you know, you want to try to execute. It doesn't matter which pixels you find which appear to be darker than me. You know, you should have just gone for the pupil. Why go for the spot? The bottom line is, this is a pale to very pale person. This is someone who's type 1 or 2 on the Fitzpatrick scale. You have created a white person. Okay, and I hope I've proven that to you now using 2 very well-known scales for approximating skin color in anthropology. So you've seen 2 of them now, and you know where you sit, so we can move on from that. Okay, so as will be seen later, we make it very clear that there are limits in relation to skin color, eye shape in our works, but even that of Amenhotep III is not of a white person, or not a white person. Well, I think we've proven that it is a white person at this stage, as some claim. So it's not just me, I'm glad to see. It says some claim. So hopefully you've seen that before, but it's a white person. I even compared skin samples from Amenhotep III and King of Monologue. That's what he calls me, that I find funny, the King of Monologue. Is that a dig? Because I'm probably the king of monologuing. I do it too much. And the following showed regions with a lighter tone than the first. It's a ridiculous argument. It should be noted that although the background of the image used to approach the pharaoh is black, the 3D bust was illuminated from all angles with strong lights. Now, this is me just being a bit kind of like picky here as a graphic designer, but that last statement is not true. Okay, you said it's illuminated from all angles. That's observably not true, because you can see that the ear and the sides of the face are much darker than the front of the face. Now, this is not a problem on a graphic design basis, because clearly you're illustrating the fact that the crown is casting a shadow over the ears, which is correct, but that also makes it very clear that the ears are not side lit. There's also no backlight. There's no backlight halo. This is being lit from the front by 1, at most 2 sources of light that are directly being shone from the front, and they're quite dim. So this part over here, like, don't kid a kid out. We both know how graphic design works. Okay, you're a very good graphic designer. I've seen your work. You know exactly how this works. That's, once again, you being dishonest, because it's not lit from all angles. It's lit from the front and only the front. Okay, so you have to kind of like get this right. All right, let's move on. I mean, he's put in a few more of those images just to like drive, and he's zoomed in there to drive home the point. Look, he's blacker than you. Like, come on, dude, this is really terrible. All right, zooming in on the skin sample. Interestingly, Amenhotep III appears darker even with the light. He keeps going. I'm gonna move on now, because I think we beleaguered that point and we've addressed it. So let's move on. Now he says, because I've seen it. This is what I've said. Because I've seen your articles. Don't worry, I've done my homework. That's neither, I think I said neither here nor there. We're going to be revisiting a few of your links anyway in this live stream, but I feel honest with you. Share the name of the documents all online, no problem. Yeah, please do that. Okay, I think this is when I was talking with you, and you said here in response, apparently TKM didn't read the articles in your live. You just showed an article that I published in 2014 at the beginning of my studies, and ignored the article that I reported in the comments. Yes, because I can't respond when I'm doing a live stream and read an article that I wasn't planning to read during a live stream. So I hope you appreciate that. Now we are trying to give you that we're trying to give you the respect now of visiting all of the articles that you post. Now let's carry on. I could start off with the fact that even the way the capreche sits on the head. So I did speak about the fact that I didn't like the way the capreche was kind of like planted on the head and kind of looked like this big solid crown that didn't really understand the ethnotrichological nature of the crowns, and as though it's some kind of solid gold crown. That's what I said there, or something like that. Okay, and he's posted here this reference image from Smith, which is irrelevant because none of the crowns of Kemet have been found, and also this isn't a capreche, this is a hedjet. So this isn't even the same crown. So this is the Hejjet, and it's not been found. So this is just guesswork from an Egyptologist. He said placement reference, head anatomy itself, and reference from the book Catalogue de General, blah, 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 by Grafton Smith, which is fine. Look, this is, once again, this was just my personal point of view. I don't really have, this is us both being subjective here. You can put the crown on your head how you like. We don't have a crown to compare it to, so I'm absolutely fine to kind of like let that one go. But I just want to point out this is Hejjet and it's not the Capresh, so it's not relevant. But let's move on. Mention this to my community is that they are wholly dependent on reference data. Okay, so they're very, very dependent on reference data, and the reference data is dependent. Okay, so this is obviously me making a statement in regards to the fact that they really do and should rely on the anthropology when it comes to making their decisions about how they look. And there's not this kind of like one size fits all donor. Even with his approach, which kind of combines, and we'll look at some of his papers in a second, but his approach that kind of combines the Russian method and the English method, the Manchester method, and kind of like he's got his own kind of like hybrid method, which obviously uses 3D data, which we'll look at. It's very good. I'm not going to lie, it's a good process, but the bottom line is there's a huge dependency on decisions that are made regarding ethnicity, and what decisions are made regarding ethnicity impact greatly what he comes out with in the end. And if you've gone in there with an idea that I need to produce a modern Egyptian, you end up with what he ended up with, Amenhotep III. And it's, you know, that's obviously where we have a difference with each other. My technique is a little different from those mentioned. We remove, for example, muscle modeling and use projections based on averages of who? And proportions from computed tomography scans. And this is one of my big issues. I've read through, and we're going to have a look at a couple of these papers now, I've got them all open. There doesn't seem to be, first of all, he doesn't provide any data about who these averages are made up from. So I've obviously inferred the fact that I don't believe these averages are diverse, or at least diverse enough to represent all of humanity. You can't say that a black person's features sits on, you know, a skull the way a white person's features does. You know, there's differences. There's differences to the tissue depths. There's differences to even the thickness of the skin. There's differences to the projection. There's differences to the way kind of like muscle, cartilage, mucus is expressed throughout the face. All of these things, there's massive differences. And as I've shown you with that Rwandan example at the start, even within African ethnicities, not even within across Africa, we're talking about within ethnic groups, we have far more diversity in Africa than they have across all of Europe. You cannot find the kind of difference that I showed you here. Let me just quickly, have I got the Rwandan thing open? Let me just pull that open again, because this is quite important to drive this home. Let's go zoom through this. Okay. The kind of differences that you see expressed within ethnicity, so this is within a single ethnic group within Africa, the difference from this person to this person to this person, you don't see that kind of difference across all of Europe. You will not get two individuals this physically different if you scaled from one side of Europe to the other. European phenotypic diversity is tiny in comparison to African. And this is reflected in the genotypic diversity. Africans are around 25 times more genetically diverse than all of the rest of the world. Okay, and to put that in context, there are 4 genes, and I've mentioned this several times now, 4 genes responsible for complexion in Europeans. There are over 100 genes responsible for complexion in Africans, and they're expressed differently. So when you get a light-skinned African, they are not expressing the same genes that a European is expressing to get their light skin. And we have over 100 that determine that. And that is just a reflection of our phenotypic diversity as well. We have exactly the same thing with our phenotype, as you're seeing with these skull shapes, and you're seeing with these zygomatic projections, and you're seeing with the, let's look at something as simple as the length of the alveolar here, determined by the length of the maxilla, this kind of like top lip region. Look how it varies. Okay, look at the expression of the mandible. Look how the lower jaw here is slightly retrognathic, very retrognathic, prognathic, totally orthognathic. I mean, the diversity that you're seeing here across within a single ethnic group is massive. And this is one of the things, unless you have someone who has that kind of expertise, and I wouldn't expect, in fact, I'm just going to show you a paper to actually drive this home, because this is actually really, really important. Okay, because he sent me this paper, and he admitted something in this paper that I feel really typified what I think is going wrong with the work that he's doing. Not that it's, like I said, I want to read this to you because this is really important. Okay, so this paper is called Digital Facial Reconstruction, Blind Tests and Practical Application of the Protocol. And I'm going to read this to you. Learning to model a face on a computer is not the quickest and easiest task in the world. By the way, this was, I'm totally transparent, this was written in 2014, so I'm sure he may have changed some of these views, but I still think it's poignant to point this out. Okay, in the world we have more than 6 billion people, and no face is the same. No matter how much the artist studies, he will never be able to model all the shapes. He will never be able to master nuances of complexity that we have in this notorious region of the body. Still, talking about the distinct characteristics, I confess I didn't realize the issue until I started working with facial reconstruction. In this case, the artist or scientist who will carry out the reconstruction almost always has no idea what will appear before their eyes until the work is finished. The more he reconstructs and compares the data with the individual's appearance in life, the more he sees that he cannot stop studying. Now, pay attention here, guys. There are professionals in this area who are excellent reconstructors for Caucasians, Negroes, or Malays. Now, I want to highlight this because this is where I think the issue happens. Okay? He's acknowledging the fact that, first of all, you can't be an expert across all fields. And I will actually put my hand up to this. I think in the time that I've been doing reconstructions, and obviously even before I started reconstructions, you guys know I had a massive interest in African phenotypic diversity. I've dedicated so much of my time in understanding the different faces you get across Africa. I don't expect Cicero, or actually anybody in his field, to have the kind of understanding of African phenotypic diversity that I do. I think that I have much more insight, and so I don't have an expectation for him to get these nuances. The image that I just showed you of the different faces in Rwanda, I guarantee you that I would bet my right arm that Cicero had no idea that that kind of diversity existed within ethnicities in Africa, let alone across Africa. And I think most anthropologists don't understand this either, which is why they'll pick up a skull and they'll quickly designate it Caucasoid or mixed or this, that and the other. And a lot of Africans do that too. They see ancient Egyptian statues and actually, until I create the reconstruction, they've only ever seen someone who's mixed or someone who, and I was like, no, this is an African. This is typological. This is like a textbook East African or Central African or something. These features are textbook Africans. These aren't people who are exhibiting admixture. These features that we call Caucasoid or we give to other parts of the world, that part of the world has most likely inherited it from Africa. And we have to understand this. And this even goes to things like, epicanthal folds that we see on, on the eyelids and stuff like that in China and Japan. That's been inherited directly from Africa. Okay, and I'm not just the Koy and the San people. This is exhibited even in modern day, Nigerians, Congolese, people can just be born with those kind of eyes, because Africa's phenotypic diversity is just so deep. And I think that this is the area where we have a problem. I think this is the area where if you don't appreciate and understand this kind of difference and this kind of diversity that we have in Africa, where people can exhibit very, very different facial traits, from thin lips to thin noses, and be 100% African without any admixture. Until we appreciate that, we're going to continue getting people who keep making these mistakes when it comes to doing these reconstructions and estimating the ethnicity of the ancient populations, not just the Egyptians, lots of ancient populations. They'll get them wrong, okay? But you just have to open your eyes, and like we've already discussed, you will see those exact traits. King Tut's exact skeleton can be found today amongst the Massa. I'll tell you that for free right now. Or amongst the Kikuyu, you will find his exact skeleton, exact skull, exact dolichocephaly, exact anthropometric proportions, exact teeth, everything. You'll find the exact person. You'll find him amongst the Arbore in Ethiopia. You'll find him in several different ethnicities. You will find exactly what you're looking for when it comes to King Tutankhamen. You'll find him amongst the Somali. You'll find him in so many different places. You'll find him among the Tutsi, because Africa is so diverse. And I think this was eye-opening for me when I read this paper. That was a really good kind of admission that he made there. And I think he's very good at Brazilian faces. That's what I've seen. Even the reconstructions that he's done of black people end up looking like Brazilians. So I think he's got this kind of like, his data set and his skill centers around creating people with a kind of Brazilian phenotype. So even when, like I said, even when he got the black, like the black reconstruction he's done, the Nazlet Ketar and the Sekenenre Tar reconstructions he's done, which are black, they ended up looking like black Brazilians. They didn't quite look like black Africans when he made them. And I think that's because his tissue data and his data leans towards what's around him. He doesn't have that understanding of what Africans look like. So it's impossible to recreate something that you don't understand. It's impossible to recreate something that you don't observe. And I think that's where a lot of the problems come in with the work that he does. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of like, I wanted to kind of show that. I'm not going to read the whole paper because we've got a lot to get through today. But let's carry on. Projections. So my technique is a little different from those mentioned. We remove, for example, muscle modeling and use projections based on averages and proportions from computed tomography scans and ultrasound measurements in living people. If you had access to the article I proposed in your live, this would be clear from the beginning. So to me, this was relatively clear. And I think actually in one of my lives, we spoke about the fact that you use a donor and you conform the donor to the shape of the skull. But once again, that conformation is also informed by the ethnicity. Because it expresses itself differently depending on the ethnicity. So I've just got some of his papers open here, the 3 that he's recommended. We're not going to read through them all, but I'm going to just quickly have a look and see if there's anything in each of them that we need to cover, because as you can probably appreciate, we haven't got time to read all of them in this live stream. Which one's this? This is okay, so this is I think we've been through this one. This is the one we went through last time, the Tutankhamen one. So I can close this one. Yeah, I'm gonna close that one. So the ones, I think this is the first one. Right, so actually I'm going to just quickly scroll up and see if there's any super chats, because I'm really bad and I miss those often. Don't think I missed any, which is good. It means I can move on. Cool. I think you guys are all having quite a nice chat in the chat. Well, how are we doing for numbers? 360 online. Make sure you hit up the likes, guys. If you're enjoying the live stream, that is. Like it, support it, let's get it out there. So this one is the one about the nose. I'm just going to flick it to English. So he talks about basically how the nose is. Now this one's quite interesting. Like I said, we haven't got time to read it in its entirety. As you can imagine, this is a live stream, but there are things that we can kind of gain from this. So when it comes to the shape of the nose, he has these formulas. So okay, so let's just read from here. I was going to read from up here. Okay, so the first stage consisted of approximating the profile of 50 individuals using 2 projections, one based on the Manchester method, so this is what I was talking about earlier, and the other on the Russian method. So these are 2 different methods. Now, just to quickly nutshell Manchester and Russian method, the Manchester method utilizes pinpoints on the skull, okay, and then attributes different depths of tissue to those pinpoints, whereas the Russian method is basically utilizes layering muscles. So you kind of start with the skull and you build the muscle up in layers. That, in a nutshell, is kind of the difference to the 2 approaches. The objective of the mixed technique is to generate a coherent structure with both approaches, avoiding common inaccuracies when using one of the techniques separately. In the case of the Manchester methodology, it's common to estimate an exaggerated projection of the nose, while the Russian approach a smaller nose than the original. Okay. In all cases, we chose to use some of the soft tissue thickness markers based on the survey carried out on living individuals of European ancestry and with a medium BMI. In general terms, even if the individual in question did not belong to this ancestry, the divergences of the reconstruction with different tables do not compromise the general structure of the face as demonstrated in previous studies. Now, why did I highlight the fact that he said of European ancestry? Because once again, there seems to be an expertise or a leaning in his work towards making faces of European or lightly mixed ancestry, and I haven't seen anything to indicate when he's creating these donor shapes, or when he's creating these kind of like templates that he uses, that he has any contribution or even understanding of different black phenotypes, different African phenotypes. I don't see that being applied. Okay, let's just read on quickly. The 50 facial approximations were performed blindly, that is without access to soft tissue model, but only with the skull available. Only after the profile projection was estimated was the soft tissue model activated and superimposed, allowing comparison of the approximation in relation to the real face. So basically, they did these blind studies. They've got a model where they're able to reconstruct. Okay, a lot of them came out. Well, actually, let me just show you the confidence. He has this little confidence table here. So they did a little bit of confidence vote based on these reconstructions, and 3 said it was reasonably similar. 4 says it's a similar profile. There were no 5s say like it was a total match. There was 1, but basically 3 seemed to be the mode average. Okay, so most people said reasonably similar what they came out with, which is kind of like middle of the road. Okay, now I don't doubt his ability to recreate a European face, and the reason why I don't doubt his ability to recreate a European face is what I said earlier. There's very little diversity amongst people who we designate Caucasian. You'd be surprised. There's very little diversity. There's not much possibilities in terms of what a nose is going to end up looking like. It's quite small, or at least comparatively. If we're going to talk comparatively speaking, compared to Africans, the range of what you can get out is tiny. Okay, and yet they have so much accessible data when it comes to recreating the European phenotype, and I don't believe that he has the requisite data in Africa or amongst Africans or amongst black people to make these, to make reconstructions that are credibly African, which is why it's the assumption instantly when he looked at the mummy of of Ramesses, and then he saw the statue of Mummy. Oh, they're not compatible. He actually looked at the skull of Tutankhamen and said, "Oh, it's not compatible with artwork." I mean, that's a load of rubbish. It's entirely compatible with the artwork. Entirely. Tutankhamen is probably one of the most compatible with the artwork you can get. You've never made the attempt because you don't understand African phenotypic diversity, and I don't think that's your fault, by the way. That's just the way it is. No one in this field, by the way, can I just say that? No one in this field understands African phenotypic diversity. No one. And I'll hang my hat on that. No one in this field, in fact, even in the entire field of anthropology. I read a paper recently. I've got a paper in front of me, actually. It's called the International Anthropometric Study of Facial Morphology in Various Ethnic Groups and Races. Now, it's by Leslie Farkas. Now, I'm not going to read it out to you, but the reason I mention this is because this paper was kind of like a revisiting of physical anthropology or facial morphology across different ethnic groups. Now, this paper has I'm going to give you the exact number, okay? 3 ethnic groups representing black people. Those are Zulu, African Americans, 4, Tonga and Angola. So 4 ethnic groups that are supposed to represent the entirety of the black race. And then across Southeast Asian, there's 3. And then for Caucasoid groups, there's about 30 to 40. So it's really hilarious because they've got a Azerbaijan group, a Bulgarian group, a Czech group, a Croatian group. I mean, most people, not being racist, most people be like, Czech and Croatian? Like, there's a difference. German, Greek, Hungarian, Italian, Polish, Portuguese, Slovak. We've got Slovak, Czech, and Croatian, yeah? And Russian. No, I'm not going to go on. I'm not going to read them all out. The point being is that African diversity in this paper represented in 4 groups. The fact that African American is just do you know how diverse African Americans are? First of all, it's crazy. Okay, so black ethnic diversity, African diversity is not respected. Okay, it's absolutely not respected. And until we kind of like take a stand and start saying, hey guys, you know, we exist, we look different, we express ourselves in different ways, and you can't keep digging up our bones and calling them Caucasoid. It's rude. Stop digging up our bones and calling them mixed, because you've never come across this phenotype, or you don't associate this phenotype with Africans. Someone said, why did they exclude East Africa? God knows. Why did they exclude Central Africa? They always exclude it. They do this stuff all the time. They have no, it's almost like they don't want to. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I've already done my King monologue thing and sidetracked into a different rant. But there's also another paper that I was reading about the differences between women. So it was an orthodontic paper, and it was looking at differences between black women and white women. So for so long it's just been black American, white American. Those are the 2 standards, and then they introduced some more. And then one of the researchers decided that she was going to do some research on Sudanese women. So this researcher did research on Sudanese women, and Sudanese women, as you know, are black women. Okay, so Sudanese are black women. These are black Sudanese women. What do you think the outcome was? Obviously, the outcome was they were completely different to black Americans, okay, and completely different, obviously, to North American white women. Completely different. Just kind of like a group within themselves, but it's kind of like, well, of course they are. Okay, Of course they are. And if you was to do another test on Nguni women, you'd get completely different. And if you was to do another test on Khoisan women, you get completely different. And if you was to do another test on Habesha women, it'd be completely different. These are all black women, but you're going to get different outcomes. And it's only when you start respecting African phenotypic diversity that you're going to start getting good results out of these. Okay, so let me move on to the next paper. Hold up, PC, please don't crash on me. This one's investigation of anatomical predictors of position in eyeballs, nasal wing, lip projection, and others based on the skull structure. Now, I'm not going to go into this one too much. Once again, really good, strong process. Read what I want you to read with me regarding the lips, because this was actually one of the things that I was really concerned about, because I was like, in all of your reconstructions, I haven't seen any lip projection. Even in the black reconstructions, you always have these really tight lips that are literally glued to the teeth, which is not something that is really kind of like, you know, Africans tend to have slightly freer lips, okay, or at least it's common. You'd think one or two of your reconstructions, particularly the ones where you anthropologically have been informed that you're making a black person, that you would have approached the lips with a little bit more generosity, so to speak. But here's the reason why. Let's have a read together. Lips, they are located in the lower third of the face, just below and centered in relation to the nose. They perform numerous functions such as phonation, suction, promoting the sealing of the mouth between the internal environment and the external environment, assisting in chewing. So you all guys all know what your lips do. They vary in color and thickness according to ancestry. That's important, okay? And there are structures extremely valued by us human beings with important aesthetic characteristics. It is mainly composed of muscles, glands, and covered in mucosa. Okay, so bear that in mind. Now I'm going to scroll down to the part where it talks. So these measurements that you see here, I'm not going to try and teach everyone exactly how all this works, because to be honest with you, some of it I'm still learning, obviously. But these measurements you'll see if you do any kind of craniometric studies, these are the common measurement points. Okay, you see these quite a lot. So you'll see these are very, very common measurement points that you'll see as references. Now I'm just going to quickly go to, I'm not going to read out the whole thing. I'm going to go to lips, because obviously this is one of the parts that I have a slight issue with in terms of his process. I'm trying to find it. Other projections, incisors, Java. Did I go past it? Wait. Bear with me, we'll get there. I always say that. Okay, I'm going to scroll back up. I think I've gone past. Oh no, is it here? Okay, I'm going to scroll back up. I think it's here. Frontal mouth tracing. Is this it? It must be. Yes, I think that is it. Okay, so I'm going to read here really quickly. The average Chile on line. So if we just quickly scroll back up to the those points, so we understand what they're talking about here. So there we go. It's the CH to CH line. So that's basically your mouth width that they're talking about here. I'm just going to read this really quickly, because this is quite important to me in terms of how they're assuming the lip size. It was 47.7 millimeters with a standard deviation of 5. The projection that proved to be the most promising was the one in which the distance from the infraorbital blah 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 was added, plus the distance from the mental blah blah blah, dividing the result by 2. Another promising approach was the use of the distance between the gonions, maximum orthogonal frontal limit divided by 2 in the absence of the mandible, and even part of the maxilla. The CH distance can be obtained by multiplying the FMO distance, blah blah blah, with a standard deviation. A more subjective projection is based on the positioning with one of the elements approximated is one that uses the sum of the distance between the pupils. So the reason I read out all of this, I know that a lot of that would have went over your head, but what I noticed through going through this paper, and I did go through it quite a lot, is there's nothing about lip protrusion in this entire paper. Okay, it talks about basically being able to estimate the width of the mouth, but without the protrusion of the lips. And this is why there seems to be so much subjectivity in terms of how much they make the lips stick out, which obviously is a massive phenotypic trait for Africans. Is one of the things that differentiates us from probably most populations around the world, is that we have more protruding lips. Now I think there is a very basic mention of the fact that the lip protrusion is linked to, I can't remember what it says, maybe something to do with the alveolar tilt or something like that, I can't remember, but there's no kind of like in-depth study. So that to me was the instant kind of like alarm bell as to why when he does his reconstructions the lips are always so tight. Okay, the lips are always so tight because there's no rule in this reconstruction governing when you should make the lips larger or protrude, and perhaps the reason of that is because there's nothing governing that. Even here it says here the study sought to position the CH points at the structural limit of the lip opening. However, depending on the individual's age or other factors, when the lips are closed, there may be a tendency for the expression mark to be highlighted in the final line to be significantly larger than the actual opening. So you can see this is once again just talking about the fact that when you close the mouth widens. Okay, once again we're talking about mouth width, we're not talking about lip protrusion, and this is an important distinguishing factor. This is something that we see in the ancient Kemetic artwork and something that is chosen to be ignored. In fact, quick shout out, thank you very much Kalnari, one of my strongest supporters, really appreciate it. Well until they discover the Egyptian sculptures that were made from casts just like Hollywood. Amazing. I think I need to look into that. Drop me something on the Discord so I can so I can make a short about that. That sounds amazing. Thank you very much for your $20. It's much appreciated. But let me drive home that point. So let's go into his reconstruction of Tutankhamen. Okay, so this is Cicero's reconstruction of Tutankhamen, which I've critiqued elsewhere, or I'm not going to go into a big critique of that now, but here's his reconstruction of Tutankhamen. Now he's made a decision here about how thick these lips are going to be. I know from reading his papers that the width of the mouth has been governed by the traits that he's seen on the skull, but the thickness of the lips and the decision to make the teeth protrude, even though, like we discovered in our last live feed, the teeth are very common amongst East Africans. He has all of the orthodontic traits that we're used to seeing in East African types. In spite of that, he's decided to give him these relatively modest lips that don't match the artwork. Now that's a choice, because as far as I can see, there's very little in his process that's governing how thick the lips should be. He's got guidance about how wide they should be, but not how thick they should be. So he could have made them thicker, is the point. I think the reason he didn't make them thicker is because he had already made the nose look a lot more like the statues. And if he had made the lips thicker and this had been a little bit darker, then you can see this would probably started to look like the real Tutankhamen, which is a black African. I don't know. That's kind of the feeling that I got as to why he kind of like still proceeded to make some errors. There's actually quite a few errors with the Tutankhamen reconstruction that I sent to him directly, but I'm not sure if we'll cover in this live stream today. Let's move on. Okay. Actually, there was one more paper. I'm just trying to see. I don't want to kind of like miss. Which one's this? Okay, this is the nose one. I think we've. No, this is important. So this is the final one that he sent me. obviously can't read these in total, guys, as you can understand. I'm sure he wants me to, but I haven't got time to do that. But let's just carry on, because this one's actually got some really important information as well. So this chapter aims to present the results of a study carried out on 35 anonymous computed tomography CT scan examinations of Moldovans, and compare the numbers with similar studies carried out in Brazilians and Malaysians. Once again, all areas that I think he's probably quite good at. Notice the startling lack of anything to do with Africans, okay? And yet bear in mind, guys, he's reconstructing Africans. Let's not lose that point. When he's doing work with the ancient Egyptians, he's not recreating Brazilians, he's not recreating Malaysians, Moldovans, or any other European group or South American group. He's reconstructing Africans. And yet I see there seems to be a startling lack of, and it's not just I'm not going to say lack of experience, but the thing that concerns me more is the lack of the data. There's a startling lack of data or data sets on Africans and how African, are phenotypically and facially expressive within their cultures. I don't think he understands that fully. And that's a fair criticism, because like I said, I don't think many people do. But it's until that's highlighted, and perhaps he shows a willingness to work with people who are more knowledgeable and more expert in the field of African phenotypic diversity, then he's going to be destined to make the same errors over and over again. You've just raised a good point. Set Amenhotep just said he'll say Brazilian includes African. Well, in order for him to make that claim, what he'll have to do, and this is something he hasn't done in any of these papers, is he'll need to provide his sample set, because that's what I want to see. I'm not going to take your word for it. I've said to him many times, well, where did you get these donors from? Who have you sampled to get these averages from? And I've got sweet silence. Oh yeah, I used the mixed set. Well, who are they? Where are they? Why wasn't it a part of your process to document and photograph these people? So the burden of evidence will remain upon him to prove that he's actually taken into account black phenotypic diversity when he's created these. Otherwise, then we can all say we've done stuff. It's neither here nor there. You have to provide the evidence that you have the requisite expertise to be able to be working with African remains. You have to provide that. That's the issue that we have here. But that was a really good point. Thanks for raising that. Let's and by the way, I'm sure lots of people are making good points. It just happens to be, if you're lucky enough for me to be looking at my chat at that moment in time. So yeah, I'm not going to read through all of this. I think the thing that I want to communicate is that, is there a degree of objectivity to the work that's being done? Absolutely. This is a definitely has very good and sound processes. I never doubted that. The issue was, and I stand by it, and none of this is proven otherwise, is that his starting point is flawed. He doesn't have the requisite data on Africans, nor is his starting point been when it came to, for instance, making Amenhotep III's reconstruction, that he was dealing with an African. He felt he was dealing with a Middle Eastern. He's provided data that would help him to approximate a Middle Eastern face, and surprise, surprise, he's come out with a Turkish face. Okay, that's the bottom line. So yeah, I'm not going to read this whole paper. Let's carry on going through his critique. So we've looked at the 3 papers. I know we haven't read them. We don't have the time to do that. I will respond in when I actually write my paper. At the moment, we can only just gloss over them. So, okay, so this is back to me again. Okay, they rely on anthropological tools. Now, to me, that works backwards slightly, and the reason that works backwards with me is because I've been studying craniometrics. It's hard to read back stuff that I've written, that I've said, not in a scholastic manner, but certainly for very, very, quite in depth. Making me sound like a moron. manner, I've been looking through thousands of skull now, and there are anthropometric traits. Okay, so yeah, I stand by that, obviously. Looked at loads of trials, and this is literally what we're talking about right now. I've also studied thousands of skulls, so this is his response. And as I develop technology for surgical planning, teaching students from 30 different countries who use the solution in their daily work in important hospitals, planning critical surgeries, covering everything from babies to elderly individuals. However, we publish articles about this study. I asked TKM to publish his studies. I would like to analyze the approach, which I will be doing. I'm trying to think, was there anything relevant in this study? I think I've got it open here. So I think this is it here. It just talks about helping hospitals. I don't think there's anything we can actually gain from reading this at the moment. Once again, it just covers his process. Again, once again, it's not really in the realm of kind of blind reconstruction, so it's not that useful, but it's obviously useful to understand his processes, which is absolutely fine. Let's carry on. They're essentially given an ethnicity by oftentimes funders. I absolutely stand by that. Okay. Sometimes anthropologists who say this is the ethnic group that you're going to be reconstructing, and then obviously in modern times now, that's always going to be modern Egyptians, and modern Egyptians is a term, and it's coming off there. So it's not quite like that. As I discussed previously, we use the anatomical approach, and if TKM had read the article about the approximation for Nazlet Keita, so Nazlet Keita is the black Egyptian that he's done, and we're going to look at that now, yeah, he would see that we created a colored version of the approximations and another in grayscale with the eyes closed. This second approach is objective and resolves practically all issues related to eye shape, skin tone, etc. So I refuted that. Okay, one of the main reasons I refuted that is I told him straight up and down, and I said this on the live streams, the grayscale that you've produced, we'll look at Nazlet Keita later, but I want to tackle this claim of grayscale being objective. So the idea is that I make a reconstruction, I make it grey, and now that I've made it grey, it's racially objective. I obviously returned back to him and said that's rubbish. Making something black and white, which is what grayscale is, doesn't suddenly make people enable to see what race it is. Okay, it can be done, but it needs to be done in a very consistent manner. So even if I, go back to the Tutankhamen that had open, this is his grayscale Tutankhamen. It doesn't matter that it's grey. That is definitely not a black boy. And I'm talking about complexion wise, we're talking about now. I'm not even talking about features. Forget the features. Complexion, this person is clearly very, very, very pale. Irrespective of it being grey. This is not an objective grayscale. Okay? And I'll prove this. I'll prove this. Because when I took this seemingly objective grayscale and I ran it through an AI recoloring tool, AI tool will just look at basically the tonality of the greys, same thing that your brain will do on a subconscious level. So when we look at this, even though it's kind of grey, our brain subconsciously knows what color it is. It's the same reason we can look at a black and white photo. We don't look at a black and white photo of our granddad and go, oh my God, mom, granddad was white. No one says that. Okay, if your granddad's black, he still is black. If your granddad's, everyone, this is not objective at all. This is totally subjective. It has to be done properly. So when I run his reconstruction through a AI approximation tool, surprise, surprise, look what it fed out at me. Okay, this is what it spat out. Okay, very clearly quite pink, but clearly not objective at all. Okay, making the reconstruction in color, which is what I believe he's done. Someone said amber rose. Yeah, even more so now that I've run the color with it. Making the reconstruction in color and then desaturating it to black and white doesn't suddenly make your reconstruction objective. This is not objective grayscale, and I've explained this to him ad nauseum, and he stands by the fact that it's subjective. It's like, dude, you are a graphic designer. You know for a fact, this is the image that I gave him as an example. This is quite funny. This is me being facetious, by the way. So I sent him this image, And I said, oh, I guess we can't tell who's black and who's white in this photo. No idea. I mean, it's grayscale. Who's the white man? Who's the black man? We have no idea. It's grayscale, magic grayscale. Making something black and white doesn't suddenly make it racially ambiguous. Okay? And to drive that point home, I did this quite a few times. Okay? This is his Nazlet Keita reconstruction that he talked about earlier, where he was reconstructing a black man, and as you can see, the tones are rich. This is a black man, irrespective of it being black and white. You can see in both of them that this is a black person. Actually looks very Southern African, very Nguni looking man here. Okay, that's a black man. All right, it doesn't matter that it's grayscale. It's not objective. It was a black man before it was grey, and it's a black man after it's grey. Okay, so you've seen that, and there they are compared. Not a black person, a black person. And once again, like I said, it's not to do with the darkness or the lightness. Okay, it's to do with the richness. It's to do with the melanation. Okay, so it's to do with the amount of pigmentation which you can always pull out, regardless of the image being black and white or it being in color. You can pull out the level of pigmentation within the skin. You've seen that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else on those images that I need to show you. Oh yeah, and I also recolored the black and white image. So I actually this was actually an AI image. I actually created it in AI, but then I recolored it using an AI tool, and even the AI tool is able to figure out who was black and who was white. So there's the recoloring. Okay, so I applied a coloring filter using AI, and AI isn't tricked. It's not like, oh my god, what are you doing? I'm gonna break. You know, your brain is easily able to decipher, you know, between who's white, who's black, who's light, who's dark, and making something grayscale just doesn't change that. Okay, that's just the bottom line. All right, so there you go. So hopefully that's that point driven home. Okay, making something grey doesn't make it racially ambiguous. That's just not a thing. Okay, I'm surprised I had to explain that to him, to be totally honest with you. So so this is his Nazlet Keita reconstruction, and yes, it's black, and actually it's not the worst reconstruction in the world. It's not my favorite either. I think, like I said to you before, it looks like it looks Brazilian, and I think some of the choices that were made were, you know, let's read. I mean, I think it's good, don't get me wrong, but it could have been a lot less ambiguous in certain areas, you know. This peculiar hairstyle is one of the areas where it could have been less ambiguous. I mean, what is that? That looks really weird. Let's carry on. So I just want to materials and methods, forensic facial reconstruction or forensic. By the way, just to be clear as well, when he made this Nazlet Keita reconstruction, he came under massive heavy fire. And this did make me gain some respect from him, actually, because guess who came after him? None other than the Egyptian antiquity, who wrote to him and were basically livid that he had made a black person out of Nazlet Keita, who is definitely a black skull and definitely African. I mean, it's like, it's 35,000 years old we're talking about here. You know, it's like everyone was black 35,000 years ago. Yeah. And I don't think that his features would have been this ambiguous looking at what he was working with. I think once again this was a choice. I've already spoken about the tightness of the lips. Like, he's made the lips probably as tight as he could have made them. Feel like he could have made you know, some of these features, that nose still looks like we're working with the same donor set. So even though he's made the skin darker, it still feels like we're working with that same donor set with this nose shape, which just, I don't know, it just doesn't look right to me. I'm just being totally honest with you. So I'm not like over the moon with what he's done here, but it's still, you know, he's created a black person, but in some ways he's created a black person because he had to, because that's what the anthropology was saying. In this case, he listened. So I think I just want to get to the point where he actually mentions that. Where is it? Okay, so results and discussion. 2 approaches related to facial approximation were worked on, one more objective and scientific, and the other more subjective and artistic. The scientific approach consisted of a bust equipped with elements closely linked to the statistical aspects of the approximation, and since the initial stages of the process was composed only of data collected from tomography and measurements of living individuals and a compatible population. So this is the question here when he says compatible population. Remember what we did earlier and what we looked at earlier in regards to Rwandan. Okay, it says compatible population. Who are they using as a compatible population when it comes to their other reconstructions? Because, for instance, going back to Tutankhamen skull, it's entirely East African. It's nothing else. No one else exhibits all of those traits simultaneously. No living population exhibits subnasal prognathism, dolichocephaly, diastema, overjet, and overbite simultaneously, other than Nilotic East Africans. That's, you know, Africans along the Nile exhibit all of those traits at a very, very high rate. It's not even like it's rare. So many people have their head and skull shape. And when I say Nilotic, I mean anyone along the Nile, blue and white Nile, by the way. So it doesn't matter if you split off down the Horn or you continue down towards Central Africa. All of those populations that border the Nile all exhibit those traits at such a high rate. Were they the compatible population when you were making Tutankhamun's skull? I highly doubt it, given what you came up with. So this is the issue that we have. It was possible to generate an anatomically shaped face, coherent, and to reduce incompatibility in the orbit region. Images were rendered with the eyes closed, as well as to avoid speculation about the tone of the skin without hair, as there is no information about the configuration of these structures, and the color chosen was grayscale. If there's no avoiding information on the skin tone for which there's no information available. So I think he's talking about the grayscale version here, which clearly is a grayed out black person, in my estimation. The more artistic approach consists of a colorful image with eyes open, with a beard and hair. Even though it contains speculative elements about the individual's appearance, it is a work that will be presented to the general public. It provides the necessary elements for a complete humanization, which is very difficult to achieve with just the exposure of the skin, and is deficient in the objective image in grayscale with eyes closed. Furthermore, the configuration is consistent with anthropological analysis carried out on the skull, suggestive of African Negroid ancestry. Okay, so anthropological analysis carried out on the skull suggestive of African Negroid ancestry. So what is the takeaway here? They've assigned Negroid ancestry to Nazareth Keita probably because it doesn't exhibit any Caucasoid traits. Remember, that's the rule set. Whereas they're not assigning Negroid ancestry to Tutankhamun because they're not familiar that those traits that Tutankhamun or Amenhotep III has are African traits. They are unfamiliar with them, and therefore they're placing them in this kind of like ambiguous bucket, even though they are very African traits, just as African. You know, looking at living populations, one of the things that you'll note, and this is actually a really important side note, but I'm going to mention it. One of the things you'll note when you start studying history and bones they pull up and anthropometrics, and they keep creating reasons and mysterious non-existent populations to explain when basically black people or Africans pop up in places that they're uncomfortable with. So rather than Occam's razor, which would suggest, for instance, going back, we're just using Tutankhamen as a case study today. Tutankhamen, all of the physical traits that he has, from his body length to his craniometric measurements, etc., etc., I've already talked about ad nauseum today. We looked at a few miles down the Nile, these people have all of those traits. He's either a member of that population, or he's a modern Egyptian, even though we don't have modern Egyptians with those kind of proportions. He's an ancient modern Egyptian, because they used to have those, but they rapidly went under a process of brachycephalization, and their bones rapidly changed from being negroid to Caucasoid, and then they went through rapid this and rapid, and they create populations that no longer exist. They create mythical populations. You get these all over Europe. The dolichocephalic Europeans with mandibular prognathism, all the Habsburgs, and all this crud they come up with. Because Occam's razor suggests that these are just Africans and black people. Even aliens, I'm glad Wildflower said that. Even aliens, they'll prefer to believe people are aliens. Remember how many years people think that Tut's an alien? No one pointed out to them that he's just got a dolichocephalic African head skull. everyone was like, oh yeah, is he an alien? Look at this alien head. It's like, yeah, well, actually, I'm African and I'm offended. You just insulted my son, who has that exact head shape, you son of a gun. Yeah, so anyway, let's move on. So anyway, let's go back to the paper. We'll carry on. We'll get to the end because there's not that much left. So let's go to my next thing. I said I should say, okay, it's funny, they always use modern Egyptian as their kind of reference population, and they say, oh well, we'll settle on this complexion based on modern Egyptians. That's kind of what happens. Yeah. In the case of Amenhotep III, we did not say this. In fact, see the study on the approach of Tutankhamen. There we colored the skin using a palette compatible with statues. What? So wait a second, you colored the skin of Tutankhamen based on a palette compatible with the statues, but you didn't use the statues for references of features. Isn't that a contradiction? And which statues did you look at where the complexion you put on Tutankhamen matched? Because every single statue I've seen of Tutankhamen, his Shrabtes, Golden Throne, Mannequin, Head of Nefertem, I have never seen that pink color you used. I've seen him brown, red, Guardian statues, jet black. That's his range. Brown to black. That's Tutankhamun's range. This is a weird statement to me. And it's also contradicting something you said, because you shouldn't be using the statues at all based on what you said at the start of this paper. In addition to creating the objective version in grayscale, and we've already proven that the grayscale is not objective. Okay, we've already gone through the Tutankhamen paper in the if you want to watch that, we did it in a live stream. We're not going to go through that again. After TKM began to embroider the statues and paintings attributed to Amenhotep III, but this has nothing to do with forensic facial approximation, apparently, which is done from the skull in isolation, or the skull and anthropological data. I think we've seen that you're supposed to use anthropological data to get a probable outcome. In fact, we've seen that in every single reconstruction you've done so far. The examples shown by the king are works of art. I like the way he called me the king there. The examples shown by the king are works of art, and in addition to not being based on the skull, they also show incompatibilities with the skulls attributed to the pharaohs, be it the case of Amenhotep, Tutankhamen, and even Ramesses II. Now, we looked at Ramesses. I'm glad we did. Okay, we looked at Ramesses. So he pulled up these. Have a look at this. Yeah, busts attributed to Ramesses. And by the way, he's included the same bust 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's included the same bust. I think there's only 2 busts. He's got 12 images and 2 busts of Ramesses in those 12. So I mean, you could have shown more variety. I certainly use more variety when I do my reconstructions than you've shown here. But you use that single bust that's in the British Museum multiple times, and this one, to say it's not compatible. Says who? What? So, mummy attributed to Ramesses II. So he's just, because that's one of these kind of like, it's not compatible because I say so. Who says they're not compatible? You haven't even done some kind of fair comparison. Now, obviously I've done that, and I'm glad to pull that up again. Okay. I'll be glad to pull this up again. We looked at this at the start of the live stream. Ramesses statue. Okay, Ramesses reconstruction based on multiple statues of Ramesses. Ramesses reconstruction age adjusted upwards. Ramesses mummy. And like I said, I don't think you'd have to do much adjusting to get from that to that. I'm not saying they look exactly the same, but for him to just declare outright incompatibility, and by the way, use a very lightly shaded image. You get loads of these of Ramesses that make him look a lot lighter than he was. Okay, his skin is virtually jet black. Okay, and his hair is kind of like a mustard yellow, but it shouldn't even be that color. It's white hair that's been compressed and dyed with henna. It's not really rocket science as to how Ramesses got to where he is at the moment. But that's an East African man. Regardless of, and I know there's probably got to be a lot of people in the chat who are weary of Ramesses mummies because of the way it was found, but irrespective, this is an African man. That's the one thing I'm certain of. This is a strongly dolichocephalic, very African man. Very African man. Okay, it could be someone of Beja origin, it could be someone of Nubian, it could be someone of Kikuyu, Tutsi, it could be someone of Somali. This is just an East African, absolutely. Okay, it just is. It's just very consistent. Rwandan, very much an African. But the point being that the nose is broken, as I showed you earlier as well. So you can see in that section scan that the nose has been broken. But even with that, it's not a hop, step, and a jump away from what he looked like, or at least what my kind of reconstruction suggests he looked like based on his statues. It's not that far away. Okay, yes, the features will shrivel, so I don't know where he's going with this. I don't know if, you know, these people think that these mummies looked exactly the same in life as they do in death, as if, you know, their lips didn't shrink and their nose didn't shrink, everything's the same size. It's not. You just literally have skin and bones here. But, you know, try explaining that to Eurocentrists. Not saying that he's a Eurocentrist, but just in general. The nose of the mummy does not follow the shape of the statues. Untrue, and it's been broken, which indicates a somewhat standardized system in the composition of art, not necessarily based on realism. Now that's the statement that I'm going to take exception to, saying that it's a standardized system. If it's a standardized system, why do they look the same? Why do Ramesses statues only look like Ramesses and don't look like anybody else? You have to explain that then. You have to explain. There has to be a theory. It's either a body double theory, okay, or something. You have to come up, if you're going to make that accusation that the statues are just artwork and they're not accurate, you have to support that with some kind of data, because it's a far-fetched claim that isn't supported. Let's carry on. Make the lips thin. Now I'd be interested to know the decisions that leaned upon. Okay, so let's see what he says. The shape of the lips comes from two approaches. The proportion based on anatomical points. We covered that earlier. Okay, but that only discusses the width, and the thickness based on the shape of the teeth. So he says here, the shape of the teeth determine the thickness. See book Forensic Art and Illustration, Karen Taylor, page 398. I can't see that book. You should have quoted what she said there. But we spoke about the fact that Amenhotep III's teeth, you can see from the front, were broken. So what we did lose is a lot of that kind of like orthographic projection and that kind of maxillary tilt that would have been there. And the thing that he did when he made his reconstruction is he flattened it out completely, which I disagreed with. And I think that was his justification for making the lips paper thin. So if we just go back to his reconstruction here, he made the lips like literally non-existent. They're paper thin, but that was based on the fact that he rebuilt the skull back incorrectly. So that might have been one of his problems there. Let's go back. However, the pharaoh's teeth suffered structural losses, which I just mentioned, which reduced the size in the z-axis, which in itself already reduced the size of the lips. So he's saying structural losses reduce the size of the lips. Why didn't you build it back in that axis? And in addition, the jaw was a little open. So he's admitting here, well, he had structural losses in the teeth, so I had to reduce the lips. No, you could have just built it back and made the lips the size they should have been. I mean, judging by your Nazl at Qatar and your other reconstructions, you wouldn't have been very generous with the lips anyway, but you could have been definitely more generous than you were in the end, based on you flattening his mouth completely. And that being said, by the way, can I just quickly reiterate the point that I made earlier? That's got nothing to do with African data, because what's important to note here, this is really important to note here. Look at this guy. How much orthographic projection do you think he has? How much orthographic projection do you think he has? How about this guy? Very little, both of them. Yet, still both of them have full African lips. Still have full African lips. So even in making the assumption that the teeth or the shape of the teeth determine the fullness of the lips, which is what I was questioning there. I'm questioning the fact that you've done paper thin lips. Even people who you can see from profile view don't have, you know, high degrees of subnasal prognathism, don't have high degrees of, maxillary tilt or whatever. You can see it's kind of like they've probably got very similar skulls to Amenhotep, but they still have very full African lips. So you have to be familiar with the African data type. You have to be familiar with the African data type before you can make some of these assumptions that you're making. Okay? So the jaw was a little open. I mentioned that as well. I had to close it as well when I did the profile view. We had to close it and we had to adjust. When he closed it, by the way, he kind of forced retrographism. So he pushed the jaw back when he closed it as well, which is another thing I disagreed with. That wasn't necessary to close the jaw. I think that was a choice. We had to close it and we had to adjust the 3D mesh so that it showed a slight smile, which further reduces the height on the axis. This explains the lips format. Well, explains it to you. Don't think you have any justification for making the lips that thin, especially when the reference data, i.e. the statues of Amenhotep, show him to be one of the most thick-lipped pharaohs, out of the New Kingdom. I don't think you have a justification there. Once again, we don't have to beleaguer the point, but do I have a statue of Amenhotep III to show everyone? Let's just do this quickly for bear with me. It's actually good to have a tiny little break. It's getting late. I'm gonna wrap up soon. Just kind of want to get to the end of the paper because I actually decided I don't want to do a part 2. I've got too much to do. Let's quickly find the paper. Sorry, quickly find the reconstruction. Amenhotep III. Over here. Here you are. Okay. For SHITs and giggles, let's have a look at this one. Why would someone who looked like this so why would someone who looked like what you've made decide for themselves? Let's just have a quick look. Sorry, here. Why would someone who looked like that decide to commission statues that look like that? Oh, it's just artistic, they're meaningless. Apparently the ancient Egyptians were insane. Look at the colour. You could have chosen. He kept talking about colour. He said with Tutankhamen, oh, we used the artwork colour. Well, you've got colour here. You've got colour here. Wasn't that colour no longer applies. You've got colour here. Lips here. No longer apply? No. You got colour here. Same lips. No longer apply? No. No. He actually looked like this and just, you know, had insane amounts of self-hate, clearly. Over here, he's just a boy. Daddy made me look like a black boy. I hate myself. Come on, man. Get serious. You can't possibly. Oh, great! It's doing that crash thing. I think it's that image. Remember I did that. This is like I'm having what's it called, deja vu now, because this happened last time I was doing live streaming this, going through the images, kept crashing on the same image. All right, so let's carry on. The final reconstruction is going to look nothing like, and by the way, there's no evidence, at least from the ancient Kemet, to suggest Amenhotep was a beast, by the way. It said on the issue of potential obesity, information is present in the book X-Ray in the Pharaohs by Harrison Weeks. I haven't got the book. I'll just take your word for it that they said he's fat. That's fine. I actually have a reconstruction of him where he's slightly bigger, but I don't think he was as fat as you made him. Okay, so the only reason they do him fat is because he has a very full face. Stand by that. As in full nose, full lips, and for some reason to Eurocentrists that kind of, and I'm not calling, okay, so he's cut me off there. And he said, he's actually brought back this image. This is now the 6th time I think we've seen this image. Don't forget this image. We didn't make him white. Yes, you did. According to Harris-Plex model, yes, you did. According to the Fitzpatrick scale, he is white. He's pale. Okay, both of those scales classify him as being white. Okay, or pale. Furthermore, in the article we compose for an academic journal, we will present the objective side in grayscale, not objective, just as we have done in other projects. So that's neither here nor there. You know, let's not try and kid ourselves. Here on this channel we are quite well schooled in the process of forensic facial reconstruction. Okay, you could come up with 100 different faces using different sets of reference data based on the who or what ethnicity has been communicated to you regarding the skull that you're working with. First of all, I've seen no evidence that TKM or his followers understand forensic facial approximation. You're welcome to believe that. That's absolutely fine. Quite the opposite. Second, I discussed above, our methodology is based on volumetric structure, not anthropological ancestry data. Well, you've contradicted yourself, because we have all seen in every single example now, guys. I'm glad you've seen in every single example anthropological data was definitely relied on. And actually, even in the Nazlet Keita we just looked at, he absolutely relied on anthropological data. And he says we haven't relied on anthropological ancestry data. That's just untrue. Okay, you're not being honest now. So you're trying to say, you're saying for the sake of, basically, when it comes to the ancient Egyptians and not liking the anthropological data, or not agreeing, or at least not wanting to reference it, it suddenly becomes entirely unimportant and it's just the skull you use. But in every other case, you've utilized anthropological data, including when you're working with the police. So this is the issue that we have, okay? So we avoid many of the problems TKM addresses in this video. I don't think you do. A lot of people will kind of like read that and go, do I say kind of that much? Damn. Okay, well, they've utilized data. What have they done? What have they extracted? DNA. They've done this, they've done that, and other measurements. Anthropometrics, no, they haven't. They haven't done any of that. The data is a CT scan of a skull. Okay, they scanned the skull, so that's what we have. We have a scan of a skull. Okay. If TKM read the articles, which I have, certainly have now anyway, he will see that in addition to using measurement data, there is no need for DNA testing. Well, actually, contradicting to that, when you worked with the police, the reason DNA wasn't done is because it's expensive, and this is going to, doing this process is going to save them having the DNA test. But that tells me that DNA testing seems to be seen as the superior methodology, but this is the cheaper methodology. I think that's what you were at least suggesting. That's what I got from what I read from the paper that you gave to me. So you seem to suggest that DNA testing is actually the preference. So if DNA data is available, why on earth wouldn't you use it? You gave no indication that DNA would be useless in this process. In fact, I got the opposite from what you read. From what you wrote, especially to create an objective image in grayscale. So this whole idea that we don't want to be poisoned with any data. Don't tell me his race. Don't want to know his race. Don't want to see any statues. Don't need any of that, because I just want to build from the skull and make an objective grayscale image that's not based on race. You haven't done that once. You haven't done that once. Every single skull you've made, you've relied on anthropological data, and that has enhanced your outcomes. So is it a case of it's not useful? Is it a case that you didn't want to use it in certain cases? Furthermore, we do not need a CT scan of the skull. We can just adjust the digital donor. Okay, which donor, who's the donor made up of, what data is the donor made up of, on data from different axes with information crossing. As I have discussed above, we have extensive knowledge of structures due to the development of technology for surgical planning. Okay, so that's just, it's fine. Yep, okay, I'm going to move on. I'm not going to say anything insulting. I get your point. Problem is, they referenced the wrong ethnic group, as you can clearly see here, because they got something that looks nothing like, you can do that all day long, but they've used the wrong. It's not a problem. If TKM read the article I have about the projection of the nose, and other structures, he will see that the bones inform the parameters regardless of ancestry. No, it's not regardless of ancestry, because you do not have the requisite data about African populations to be rebuilding Africans. Okay, you've made it clear, Caucasoid, okay, or Moldovans, or Brazilians. You haven't provided us with your sample data set to say that I can comfortably sit back and say you've approximated this in a objective manner, or you've approached this correctly. You can't just hope that that same data set that you use to rebuild a Caucasian person is going to translate, because you've got nothing in your data set. Going back to the imagery, you've got nothing in your data set that would be able to rebuild, for example, just want to pop this up really quickly. Tell me what in your data set would end up with a face like that. Is it possible? Would it even be possible using your process of a donor to produce a face like this? Because I'm highly, highly doubtful. I know that the width of the nose is determined by the size of the nasal passage, and I know all of that. That's fine. But I still doubt very heavily that using your process you could come up with a face that ended up like that, or a face that ended up like this. I think running it through your algorithm and your process is always going to give you a muted, if not somewhat hybridized looking African, which is fine. Actually, this person could easily pass for just a standard South African, but I still feel like this is the limits of your data set and the limits of your donor, your starting point, so to speak. I feel like it's limited. I haven't seen anything to suggest, even when I looked at the way the nose is approximated, there's more about the projection, but I didn't see much about the way the nostrils are taken into consideration. What decides the distance of the nostrils? That's not something that's important in Europeans, because the nose tends to have a very kind of sort of a uniform shape, whereas amongst Africans, the nostril size and the nostril projection is something that is very, very important to the way an African looks, and I don't think it's taken into consideration in your process. Thank you very much, Macy. So they ignore anthropological data because they don't like what the ancient people of Kemet look like. I think so. And they don't understand it. They don't understand what the people of Kemet look like either. That's the thing. They don't want to apply Occam's razor. Sentiment stating, if we are not mistaken, this is the first facial approximation of Amenhotep III. It's our gift to all those who appreciate history. Well, I did one last year, so I mentioned that. Sorry to inform TKM, but no, the approximation he made is not along the lines of forensic facial approximation. It may be approximation, but it's an artistic one. So is yours. Just to be clear, you are making artistic approximations. You can put the word forensic at the start. It will not stop your process from being subjective. And it will not stop your process from not being a scientific one. It's not a science. Forensic facial approximation is not a science. It won't become a science. Okay? It's always going to have a subjective outcome. So you might be doing something to you're utilizing the skull and doing something to a different degree of process and accuracy, because I'm building reconstructions from statues, you're building reconstructions from the skull, but we are both doing facial approximations. Your process, like I said, might be slightly more involved, and you've got a few more experts in this, that, and I do respect that. I'm not saying that what I am doing is equivalent in terms of process. However, I am going to highlight where I feel like the process is flawed and you are missing an opportunity to create something that is accurate. I don't think your Amenhotep III is accurate. I think it's far from accurate. I think it's horrendous, to be quite frank, and I think you've made a lot of errors along the way that could easily be corrected. I also think that you're capable of correcting them, because I'll show you before we go the letter that he wrote to the Egyptian antiquities, which made me really believe he does have integrity. He does have a lot of integrity. I'm not going to sit here and badmouth him. Like I said, I think it's just a difference there's a difference in his understanding and respect of African phenotypic diversity that is limiting his ability to be able to really understand what he's looking at when it comes to the ancient Egyptians, which is fine. Of himself, made up, and I showed in my reconstruction, I believe that, yeah, his statues all look like the same person, which I stand by. Nothing about these lips is the same. Now we have this very peculiar thing. And he said, it's always important to remember that his reconstruction is not forensic facial approximation. So this is based on my reconstruction. Fine. You're welcome to say that. Sculptures were not based on the skull and may not. What do you mean sculptures were not based on the skull? Of course they're not based on the skull. Whose sculpture is based on the skull? When is a sculpture based on the skull? When does someone say, oh, I want to get my portrait done? Okay, go and get my CT scan. Don't be ridiculous. Sculpture was based on a living person. Okay? The sculpture was based on the living individual, the person who we call Amenhotep III. They did not have to murder him and take his skull out in order to produce his portrait. That's a ridiculous statement. Now, there might be a language barrier issue there, but it's a ridiculous, and it's, you said, undergone a standardization of style. That, once again, that might be the case. There might have been elements of kind of like approach to a portrait, but the bottom line is I've shown and proven consistency. Okay, I've shown and proven consistency from childhood to adulthood. I showed it when I showed the short earlier. Same person, same reconstruction, didn't change it, just maybe added weight or made it younger, made it older, didn't change any of the features, and it managed to match identically with the different portraiture that was taken throughout his life. You have to then provide an explanation for that. You have to disprove that. I've provided you with that data now. You have to say, oh, well, and you have to explain why statues of Amenhotep III only look like Amenhotep III and don't look like anybody else. Those are two things you have to make this claim. You have to support it with evidence. You haven't supported this claim with any evidence. It's just something you're saying. There's no evidence to support that. Tend to kind of twist it and turn it and ignore dolichocephaly, which I find really, really. Let's see what he says here. In his case, we are not ignoring anything. Just read the articles I mentioned above. You don't mention anything about cephalic index. Just after an hour of live, that is in the middle of the entire broadcast, TKM presents an academic article. So regarding the issue, okay, so this is my article that I provided regarding the anthropometrics. So this is the physical proportions of pharaohs, which I've presented several times, but I presented on this one by Robbins, physical proportions, living stature of New Kingdom pharaohs, and I presented this one because it specifically mentions Amenhotep III, okay, and it specifically mentions the fact that his limb proportions are perfectly aligned with Negro proportions, and very, very large gap between him and Caucasoid groups. It says whites here. Now I know it's talking specifically about North American whites, but most Caucasoid groups are going to cluster with the white proportions, okay? And most black people are going to cluster with the black proportions. And you can see Amenhotep III is right up here, okay? So he's right amongst the standard Negroid proportions, which we've spoken about ad nauseum. And you can't fake these, okay? You can't fake these. This is the reason why an East African looks like an East African. You can't fake those long limbs and the short torso. That physical difference that exists between white and black people is very, very real, okay? It's very, very real. So you can't fake that. So what has he said in response to that? Regarding the issue of height, I never made a big deal about his height, which is apparently criticized by the author. I never criticized anything to do with height. He was short. That's what the study says. I agree with that. Dr. Habit states that he could have been 1.56 meters tall, according to the data from Smith 1912. Our study also includes the article cited by the author where Amenhotep's height is 1.6 meters. Fine. There is still the issue of the standard deviation in the formula. Even so, what Dr. Habit addresses is coherent, since even in the table he is the one of the individuals with the shortest height. Okay, so I never mentioned anything in regards to there being an issue with his height. What I mentioned is the fact that you had to use the Negro equations, i.e. the equations to calculate the length of distal segments from proximal segments. You have to apply Negro equations, i.e. the calculations used on black people, in order to get those estimations correct. Otherwise his height greatly fluctuates and his proportions greatly fluctuate. It doesn't match. Basically, if you try to utilize European proportion equations, his height is well off. Okay, so that's the point that was being raised there. Not that there was an issue. They say there's no issue as long as you run him through the Negro proportions. That is, he has black people's limb proportions. That's a fact. There's no getting out of that. Now, regarding the question of race or measurement-based ancestry, anyone who has studied the subject knows the limitations. No, I don't. There's no limitations of the approach. I've spoken before. You do not get white people with these kind of limb proportions. It's so incredibly rare that you get white people with short torso, long tibia, the kind that you see in East Africans with those kind of like, Kenyan running legs. This is not some myth thing, okay? It just, there's physical differences that exist between populations. This is a population thing, okay? This is a East African highland / tropical adaptation thing, okay? Or at least that's where this comes from. There's no getting around it. So I don't think there's much limitations. There might be limitations when it comes to differentiating an Asian from a European, but there certainly is not going to be any difficulty in distinguishing this as an African person from limb proportions. That's quite easy to do. We worked on some markers ourselves and were able to make an ancestry distribution of individuals based on facial measurements. So you just ignored the anthropometrics from the limbs and you've talked about facial measurements. And it doesn't always work. Okay, but that's fine. No one's talking about facial measurements. I gave you limb proportions. You've ignored that. There are people with an ancestry that mathematically matches others, incompatible and this is a problem that we solve with anatomy-based modeling. Okay, no, you don't solve it. That doesn't make any sense. You've just said you were using facial measurements to guess ancestry, but now we can solve that with anatomy-based modeling. So I'm guessing by modeling the face, a-racially is what you're basically saying there. Well, we can't assume that it's any race, so we're modeling it a-racially, and then what you got to do, apply your objective grayscale. You're saying things that you're not doing. Every single reconstruction that you've promoted here, that you've shown us here, has an anthropological basis for estimating what the race is. That's what you've shown us. So you can't suddenly U-turn on that. Okay? You didn't like the anthropometric data that I provided you that proved he was a black African. It wasn't like this is in isolation. So it wasn't like Amenhotep III was sitting in the Negro equation and no one else was. It's just Amenhotep III, and all of the other pharaohs were kind of like all spread about. No, this is consistent. This is every single pharaoh in the New Kingdom clustering as black African, every single one of them. That's enough for you to say, okay, this is beyond the realm of kind of like maybe. This is beyond the realm of, coincidence. We have to accept that these people, who a lot of them were likely related, were all of the same ethnicity, and that appears to be along the lines of being native to Africa. Surprise, surprise. Okay, I think that's an objective approach. Call me silly. If the King's monologue was objective, if the King's monologue's objective was to show that approximation is incorrect, he failed, because the study in question, in addition to the known problems, also compares the group of pharaohs with white population, and not even our work states that he was white. Yeah, but it shows that he was white, and it doesn't fail because it compares them with whites. It uses white as a data set, and by the way, whites are not the extreme end of the anthropometric scale. Okay, Asians are the extreme other end of the anthropometric scale, and a lot of the time you'll find that Middle Easterners sometimes cluster between whites and Asians. Sometimes they cluster between whites and blacks, but the bottom line is they are not going to cluster at the rate that the pharaohs are amongst the black populations. They do not have those limb proportions, so haven't failed at all. Okay, that's just something that perhaps you need to investigate more. Even in subjected image, as was possible to observe the skin pigmentation sample presented above. Next, TKM shows another article covering DNA. The article's from 2018, so he's talking about the Jordan study that I presented, and it's in preprint. That is, it has not yet been formally published, as it apparently has not undergone peer review, which is fair. I don't think it was formally published in that manner, but the outcomes of the STR profiling can be run by anybody, as it was done by DNA Tribes 6 years prior and came up with the same results. Interestingly, this article cites a formally published work by Dr. Habicht, who participated in Amenhotep III's facial approximation work. I should know that TKM mocked Dr. Habicht. I don't remember doing that. I don't remember mocking him. I think it was stated that he was from the University of William Petrie or something like that, who was, obviously came up with it was the Hamitic hypothesis. Was it the Hamitic hypothesis? I think it was the Hamitic hypothesis he came up with. I mean, one of those racist theories he came up with is, or dynastic race theory. I can't remember which one. I always get them confused which one he came up with. He came up with one of them. He was a very well-known Egyptological racist. But I never said that Dr. Habicht necessarily was, and I certainly didn't mock him, so I'm not going to accept that. During his performance, as if he had no knowledge in the Egyptology field. That's just an outright lie. I never once even insinuated that this guy doesn't know about Egyptology. At least I don't remember that. Someone needs to timestamp me if I did. Maybe I did. I don't remember doing that. This preprint article, entitled Ancient Egyptian Genomes in Northern Egypt, Further Discussion, presents us with a table indicating the following. Amenhotep III, Sub-Saharan African, 93.7%. Now, to be clear, and I made this very clear as well, okay, I made this very clear, this is STR profiling. STR profiling gives you match probabilities. It doesn't give you percentage of ancestry, and this is what he's missed. STR profiling also, like I mentioned, is permissible in court. Okay, it's what's used to find out relation between individuals, and an 80% affinity is normally enough on the STR profiling database to assume that there's relation. Okay, so it uses match probabilities. Okay, it doesn't say you are this much of this and that much of that. So this isn't saying he was 94% sub-Saharan African. I hate that term. I'm just gonna say Central African. Doesn't mean he was 94% Central African. It means it's 94% probable that he belonged to Central African groups, and only 6% probable he belonged to Eurasians. That's what it's communicating. Now, why is this important? He says, using this data, TKM states the pharaoh will almost certainly have been black African. Okay, I didn't say that. That's what the table says. It says 94%. Okay, that's quite a high certainty. It doesn't say it's absolutely certain, but once again, couple that with the limb proportions, couple that with the craniometric traits, we are getting a bit of a picture here. However, we have some problems with this type of statement and an article on the BBC website. So he then shows this article here, which about this Nguinho de Bahia has more European genes. So look, read this. This is interesting. I love this article because this article actually supports something that I've been saying for a long time. So this is a bit of a this is a bit of a backfire in this case. So Nguinho de Bahia Flor, the samba singer from Rio, who uses his skin color in his artistic name, is genetically more European than African, indicates an analysis of his DNA carried out at the request of the BBC Brazil as part of the Afro-Brazilian Roots project. According to the analysis, 67% of the genes of Louis blah blah blah, known as Nguinho, originated in Europe and only 32% in Africa. Now, what is so wonderful about that is that this typifies everything I have been saying about genetics, particularly when it comes to SMP markers. If you've followed this channel for long enough, I've said that it's impossible to assign SMP markers to race or geography or phenotype. They're just markers and they are totally random. And I've also stated that there are several markers that are being classified as European that are either African in origin or equally African, and it just happens to proliferate in Europe, where because they do more testing, they decided to give it a European label. One such marker is R1b, which is the dominant marker in mainland Europe. But this marker is also has very heavy frequency in Cameroon, in Central West Africa, and East Africa, and it's always been there. So why is it called a European marker? Because Europeans have it. Just like everything else, once Europeans have something, they become the owners of it. But this article, to me, proves that there are several markers being attributed to the European population that do not belong to Europe. And this proves that you cannot prove race via markers. Why is this relevant? Because the study I posted, once again, I will say, is STR profiling. It looks at a probability. So it looks at where the entirety of your genome, where certain alleles are positioned within your genome, and it kind of creates like a signature for you, and then it matches that signature against other populations, and where you have similar signatures to other populations, they'll say, based on the amount of genes you've got showing up here and showing up there, showing up there, we only see that in these populations, and gives you matching probabilities for populations, completely different to a few markers showing up that have been falsely attributed to Europe that don't belong there. So actually, not only have you shown kind of like a lack of understanding between two different genetic processes, which is absolutely fine. That's, I'm not a geneticist, you're not a geneticist, but you've clearly misunderstood that. The great thing is that I'm going to use this article now to prove to people that you cannot assign race to markers. Okay, and these ancestry tests prove nothing about race. Okay, you can't say this person had this gene, they were black, this person had this gene, they were white. You can't do that. It doesn't work that way. It never has done. So yeah, thank you for that. You didn't disprove me. You've actually supported one of my main arguments, so I really appreciate that. So according to the article, popular Brazilian artist Neguinho, whose name already has a nickname linked to individuals of European ancestry, has 67% of his genes coming from Europe. Yeah, he doesn't. That's the point. The point being that they've been falsely classified as European markers, and this has just exposed it. It doesn't change the fact that Amenhotep III is still got a 94% match probability with black Africans, I'm afraid. It doesn't change that. This article does not change that one bit. Okay, it's got nothing to do with STR profiling. If you had shown me an article that said this guy, had, an STR profiling done and he came up a 99% probability of being white European and yet he's black, then you'd have grounds. But you haven't done that, so thank you for that article. Oh my god, it's 12:30. How many people got online? If it's dropped below 300, I'm gonna wrap it up because it's really late. Yeah, it has. All right, we've got 278. I would like to thank everybody for being present today, but it is late, and we've been going for 3 hours. Shining night. Blimey, it's 12. Yeah. We've been going for 3 hours. It's late. I need to let you guys go. I really appreciate everyone for tuning in. You can hear I'm whispering now. I've been late for that. I had a lot of fun, but it's been long. This is like I said, this reminds me of when I went through Metatron's last video. It just kind of went on and on. Let's part 2 this, and I don't think part 2, I think we're literally right near the end, so part 2 will be much shorter than part 1. But I was really, really appreciating everyone joining me, and obviously a massive thank you to everyone who made donations, and for you guys keeping the comments going. It's always nice to read what you guys have to say when we're having these discussions. I hope the subject wasn't too dry for you. I try to I try to kind of like keep it flowing. Hasn't been perfect, obviously, it's a live stream, so it's hard to kind of like get everything completely succinct, but I think we've been relatively quite smooth, so I appreciate RJ Mackenzie fell asleep in the middle of the stream. Sorry, RJ. Yeah, it's late. Thank you guys, hope you've had a good time. I'm sure I'm gonna get a hell of a load of DMs from Cicero regarding this. Fully said, why didn't you read my article in full on the live stream? Yeah, well, sorry, I can't. It's there's limits to how much we can go through on a live stream. But anyway, cool, bro. Appreciate all the feedback, you guys. It's like I said, it's fantastic being having discussions with you guys. Have a good evening all. I'm gonna sign off now. Peace, take care, and I'll pop a new live stream in hopefully very soon in the offing. Thanks guys, bye.